One live.
These guys are live.
We're live.
Are we live? Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
All right, we get a lot of questions all the time online.
We get a lot of questions all the time online.
I'm not doing it again.
All right.
And we get busy when we're trying to do these live with an audience and everyone. It's just hard for us to interact with the audience and answer questions all at the same time. So we just wanted to take this time to answer questions that we've seen coming in, that you guys have been submitting. We appreciate them. Thank you. Keep them coming. We're going to do more of these. But we have our announcer voice, Roy, in the background, who's going to shoot these questions off one by one, and we're going to give you our feedback. And
well, you just let me know when you're ready.
What?
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you now.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Just talk.
I hear you.
All right.
Let it rip, Roy.
So we'll go with the first question from Isaac Harbinger. Harburger. Sorry. I might have murdered that a little bit. And he said, what is the most I can get out of the 246 comp cam in a 117, and what tuner is needed to get it? It's a really big question here.
Yeah.
you're on it.
All right. Well, I took a look at that one, and the 246 cam, depending on what your setup is, and one thing you didn't say is whether or not that's a high compression 117 or if it's a CVO 117. Difference being compression. The 246 cam.
Well, also, we don't know if there's heads on this motor.
Correct.
So,
there could be a lot of variables there.
yeah, I mean, if he's asking what we can get out of it, let's assume he has some like 1 millimeter or 1.5 millimeter over valves.
I would assume it's stock.
It could be a stage 3. But if he's asking what's the most he can get out of it,
I don't think your mic is working, Jamie.
Yeah, you're sounding faint.
Yeah, you just gotta hang it in your beard.
is that better?
No.
No, it's not.
No, not really.
Well, like, I guess it's like any other cam. It really it depends on your setup. If you're set up to properly leverage a cam like that, which happens to have a pretty late intake close, I looked at it and compared it to some other cams that we commonly do use. Like, for example, a fueling 508 cam in a high compression motor has an intake close of 37. And we could dive deeper into the effects of intake close and all that and how it's going to actually run and produce torque throughout the curve and the area under the curve that you're going to see. But just for comparison's sake, the intake close on that 246 cam is 49. So it's a pretty substantial difference. So on a stock motor, what you're going to see with the 246 more than likely is a very soft bottom end of the curve, and it might make some really good mid-range and high-end horsepower, but it's going to turn on fairly late unless you have the compression and or the heads and some other components to really properly leverage that cam. Just again, to kind of put it into perspective, a commonly used cam on a stock compression 117 would be a 475 SNS cam. Again, 49 intake close on the 246. You've got split cylinders front and rear, 27.2 and 31.2 on the intake close on a 475 cam, which is one that we would lean on quite a bit to get a really nice linear curve in a factory compression 117.
Yeah, and if you want to see a dyno chart for that exact setup, like a 117 or 114 of a 475 cam, the one Aaron just talked about, it's our first cam comparison video we did, which is on the high compression motors. We have a chart on there, which you can watch that and see that chart. If I remember right, it's around like 118 horsepower with stock heads and around 130 foot-pounds of torque, maybe a little bit over.
The best cam that we've run on a stock CVO 117 is the fueling 472.
Yeah, great cam.
Stock compression,
Yeah,
stock
it's
pistons.
a bone stock motor. 472 fueling is a great. It's got an early intake close, so it handles the stock compression levels, but it's also stout enough that you can, if you later want to go to a 128 with stock heads, you can still use that cam. So it's one of the few that you can do both with.
And on that setup, we're seeing over 110 horsepower stock motor with that cam, and they're high 128s or over 130 foot-pounds of torque, depending on what exhaust you're running.
Yeah.
Don't do anything to the bike internally wise except changing the cam for a performance part, and that's what you're getting in that setup.
That's right, Jamie. And exhaust is going to be crucial with this build as well.
And the second part of the question,
Well, no, let's go back to that
now, wait.
117.
Hold
Okay.
on here. So you've kind of touched on something here, in that sometimes people get stuck on the parts they've already bought, and like a cam, and well, what do I need to do to make this cam work? Well, sometimes maybe changing that cam in the bike that you have, if you don't have a high compression or something like that, might be the better route in the end. Unless you don't want to dump a bunch of money into trying to make
rather
one
than
cam work.
Yeah.
chasing a bad hand, right?
Correct. Yeah. So sometimes
You can
one
just
bad
you
decision
can just
can
compound
be
the problem.
Yeah, exactly. It can be undone, but multiple bad decisions on top of it can make things worse.
Yep.
So
That's a very good point, Roy.
I guess in in summary of that situation for this particular question, if it is a factory compression 117, like Mike said, I would probably recommend changing that cam. Or if you have aspirations of going bigger and chasing for more power and really creating a good linear curve, maybe supporting that cam with the right parts, being compression, ported heads, a good throttle body, things of that sort, to really completely leverage the full capability of that cam.
Yeah, and so in steps there, if it's a stock motor, we go with a 472. If it's a high compression stock headed motor, a 475 is a go-to for us of what we do. Now, if you're doing heads on that same motor, we run a cam that's a little bit higher than a 500 lift that gets like 135 horse and 135 foot-pounds of torque.
Yeah.
That's a ripper, and it beats some of these 124s and 128s we do. And that's a package we sell a lot to guys that already have the 117 Screaming Eagle piston kit in it.
Mm-hmm.
And the last component of that question was tuner. Go for it, Mike.
Well,
What tuner would you use to completely get the most you can?
we prefer to use Power Vision, but I would definitely stick with a Power Vision or a TTS tuner. That's another really good module that's out there. The tuners that you want to use are the comprehensive ones that will take away the speed limiters. You can adjust timing dynamically. You can adjust your EGR. You have full access over the ECM. These days, now that they have the RDRS bikes, you need to be able to tune via traction control. So you have to have something that can unlock all these parameters. Otherwise, it's just not going to work out.
Well, Thundermax is great too. If you've already purchased
Yeah.
a Thundermax, we can do all that. Those are the three we would go
Thundermax
to.
ECM change is also a really good spot. I'm not 100% sure though on the RDRS bikes if Thundermax has come out with one. They may have. I have not yet encountered an RDRS bike with a Thundermax.
So if you already have a Thundermax, you should be calling those guys. Or if
Yeah.
you have an RDRS bike, before you do something,
Just do your research.
do your research or call us. We can get you the stuff.
And listen to the people that are going to build it.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
you're
Don't listen to the
going to
forums.
somewhere besides us, and the guy's not comfortable using the tuner that you want to use, you're probably better off using the tuner that he's
Don't go
comfortable
somewhere
with.
besides us.
Yeah,
Well,
you know what I mean.
Well,
though.
also
Some
on
people
the,
can't
on the
make it out
forum,
here.
the best thing that the guy's recommending is what he bought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the best, he's not going to
Yeah.
recommend something he doesn't buy or he doesn't,
Correct.
endorse or like or run himself.
All right, so we'll go on to the next question. Daniel Nilsson. It says, I have a special Christmas question for you guys. Which cam setup should I choose based on these facts? 1, the bike is an FXBS 2018 with a full 117 setup. It's used as an everyday rider. I want it to be smooth on low RPM in city traffic. Don't want to ride with my clutch when not necessary. In turns or slow speed as I need to of the day. So he doesn't want a lot of heavy clutch pull, I'm guessing.
Right.
You know.
He wants something that comes on right
yeah.
out of the gate.
Decent power of torque, and don't want to sacrifice low speed quality. So he wants the bottom end. Obviously,
Yeah.
the bigger you
Mhm.
build them, sometimes they lose a little rideability on the bottom end. And he says, so what's my best choice? And he says he's planning on using a Vance & Hines big radius.
Okay.
Can we talk you out of that?
Yeah, that was what I was going to say too. There's a way
You know,
we
if
can
you
talk
have
out
to
of
run
pipe
that or
real
already purchased it, cool. But if we could talk you out of it, we're going to go with a Moonshine anti-reversion 2-in-1 that fits under that bag. There's a lot of pipes out there, because that's a Sport Glide, that say they don't work with the Sport Glide bags.
Fat Bob S.
Is it a Fat Bob? It's a SB.
FXBS.
It's a BS? Okay. Well, if it wasn't SB, we have a bracket that's machined, that's aluminum, that goes where the factory mount goes for your rear bag. So if there's a 2-in-1 exhaust that doesn't work for that setup, we have a bracket made so we can run almost any 2-in-1 and still maintain that. But on that pipe, we would still run that same exhaust. We just wouldn't need that bracket. So if you have bags on your bike, we have a bracket that mounts exactly like Harley. It's a CNC piece of aluminum. And the cam, it's 2 cams I have in mind.
Me too.
475.
When he says he has a full 117, I'd
imagining
imagine
it's a
that's
stage
like
4.
a Harley stage 3 or stage 4.
Right.
We'll assume that.
Yeah, I would assume.
Yeah.
So stage 3, we would all choose probably a 472 or 475
Yep.
Yeah.
for that setup.
Great low end torque, especially with that pipe.
Yeah. And Softails inherently have a little bit less bottom end because their the primaries and their overall exhaust is shorter. So, the longer exhaust you have, the more bottom end you're going to be able to capture. So, by the way, we're still working too while we're doing
There's
this.
a dyno running back there.
That's the dyno in the background, and he is running it.
So you're going to want to usually stick with cams that have a little bit more of a bottom end versus a high horsepower, because you're going to get the high horsepower anyway, because your exhaust is going to be a little bit shorter just by the design of the platform itself.
You're referring to the 2-in-1 pipe. I think he'd suffer pretty badly if he stuck with the big radius.
That's not the worst choice. There's a couple other 2-in-1 pipes that I would say I would ditch that. A big radius, if people really like the look, it's not the worst pipe you can put on there. It's going to definitely help you maintain your low and mid range. It's just not going to give you numbers that are going to be real impressive overall. But it sounds like he's looking for something that's not super number oriented, but just real solid power all through the RPM range. So I would say, if going to a more performance oriented pipe isn't in the cards, then you could probably keep that one.
Well, plus it's a light bike, so you don't need all that torque off the line. It's a
Yeah.
light bike. That 117 with that 472 or 475 on that setup is going to be great out of the hole. I don't think you're going to lose too much. It's still going to rip. Either way, it's going to be a ripper. If you're in love with them, run them.
Yeah, sometimes look and sound is more important to people, so it happens. So we'll go on to the next one. Cameron Boswell. I have a 2018 FXFB 107 Stage 3 looking to add an HPI exhaust. Would this pair well as I continue to slowly build in stages?
Depends
Immediately, no.
Yeah, it depends what that's going to be on the top end too.
Yeah, immediately it's going to feel like you lose all of your power till 3,000. But as you build the bike, you can build the bike into that pipe.
And there's no baffling or anything you can do to that pipe in the meantime to maybe
As far
correct
as I
that?
know, that baffle only comes in one baffle. That's it.
Yeah.
Like if we were to order our AR header, you can order that with a different configuration of baffles, muffler, interior. This size right here, you can go from 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2 1/2, 3/4, with or without a dog ball. You can use the plain perforated baffle. There's different ways you can set it up to optimize it for the setup that you're running.
And could you change that later as you
Yeah.
were changing your build?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be a more ideal pipe in building in stages.
Yep.
Okay.
But for a foundation build, you're gonna, in my experience, somewhat limited as it is, you're gonna have issues setting a foundation that you're super happy with down here and super happy with up here. If you can sort of be honest with yourself and know where you're going, it might be better off to wait on some of those parts and just get the right part for what your final destination is going to be, as opposed to messing around with parts that may not play good at the bottom end of the spectrum and compromise you at the top. If you know where you're headed ultimately, it might just be a better idea to give one of us a call and we can help walk you through what parts you could go with now and not put you in a situation where you're paying for parts twice, trying to get to your end game.
I agree, Aaron. That'd be a win for you and the team.
Well, we do that. We do that a lot. And what a lot of guys see is they want something, but they want to buy stuff now. And when you do those builds that way, even though it's not all the money today, when you go that route, it costs more money over the long run.
Yeah.
You're going to spend more money. It took us a while to find a good solution for that. So that's why we finance some of these builds. It's more money now up front, but you're not buying something twice. You're not rebuilding something twice. You get what you really want now. And when we explain that to guys, usually they go for that option if it's available to them. And we just do the whole build all at once. You get a small payment and you cover it. And that's usually the end goal of what we see is they want this. It's just they got to do increments because they got to budget it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
we
instead
have
of
that.
saving for it, you get to ride it while you're paying for it.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question, Scott Harvey, what do you think about the dark horse compensator?
We have props.
We've never seen one.
Go for it.
They even sent us this cool
Oh,
display stand.
yeah,
look at that.
Sits on Aaron's desk.
They won the award that they made. That's how good it is.
Check that thing out.
You hold that thing up. So this thing is a beast. I would drop it on the table, but it's an expensive table.
But yeah, and you have a
And this isn't all of it, by the way. This is part of the stock compensator assembly.
So there's several pieces to this, but it's one assembly how it comes to you besides a washer and a bolt on the outside compared to this guy, which there's many pieces. And if you guys have seen the clutch pack or the spring pack on the back side that it makes, it's another thick piece. This guy's 2 pounds lighter, and it's indestructible. We like this guy because it's not solid.
I don't know if it's indestructible, Dave.
Yeah, we haven't fully tested that one yet.
Yeah.
We haven't destructed this.
We haven't destroyed
And
it
our
yet.
customers that destruct everything on their bike, they haven't destructed
That's
this either.
true.
It's held up.
It
So
is one thing that we have yet to have break
Belts,
out of
check.
the wild.
Transmissions, check. That, not yet.
yeah. So
Tensioners.
a couple
clutches.
things to go over when you go to this.
It's a little bit louder at idle
Yep, you're going to hear it.
because especially if you pair it with a high performance tensioner that's designed to be rigid at speed, like our tensioner.
We've been running these for a long time. It's a hydraulic tensioner, sucks up oil in the bottom right here, and it allows it to maintain pressure while you're running. It also allows it, if it gets too tight, to blow some oil out the bottom or to reset when the bike is sitting. That way it can expand and contract as your bike heats up, when you're riding. Super cool. We've redesigned it for the M8s. It works great. Anytime we're running a dark horse, we're pairing this up with it, and this does settle down that noise compared to a stock tensioner. It's great. So we typically put this in every single bike we build. If the budget's there, even on a cam job, we put in a cam job. If you put this in your bike and your bike was stock with nothing but this, you would notice a difference. It's a great piece.
It's $149.
Yeah,
It's not going
it's-
to break the bank, and it just adds a lot. Every time we replace a clutch, we're doing one of those.
You get all the chicks.
All the chicks.
Yeah. You got that in your primary,
them.
you get all the chicks.
That's right. That's right, Mike.
All right. So we'll move
We
on.
like the dark horse. It's a good part.
We'll move on here to the next question from Danny Laws.
Twin cam.
He says, I have a
Service
110
with us
twin
well.
cam having issues keeping head gaskets. In the last 2 years, I'm guessing 4 sets have been installed by various Harley shops. The question is, when I take it the next time, should there be anything I ask them to look for or, to try to keep it from happening again?
Yes. I would ask them if they know why you keep blowing head gaskets. And if they don't,
Don't take it
Yeah.
back there.
yes.
Yeah, go.
It's probably a cylinder surface or a head surface that is warped to the point where it can't maintain a seal in one of the corners. It could also be a timing issue. If you have detonation, sometimes you can blow the fire ring, and as soon as you crack the fire ring, you're done. But usually that is caused from either a warped cylinder or a warped head. And if it's pretty easy to check. If you have a flat table, I have a big granite stone that I use to check heads, cylinders, clutch plates, because it's 100% true. So you can just put feeler gauges under it, and you can tell if they're off by too much. But that would be my thought. But most importantly, if they don't know, then you're just going to blow another head gasket.
Unless they're just going to replace them for free for you, then
Yeah.
rock and roll.
Yeah. Then hopefully you get new rings every time too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure probably the other places thought they had it licked too. So. All right, we'll move on to the next one. I have Shannon from Virginia. It says, you guys worked on my bike, did an amazing job. I have a 2020 Road Glide with an SNS 124 kit. My question is, does it help to run the external vented fueling dipstick, or is it not necessary?
Necessary is the catch.
You know, Jamie, I think that you should handle this one.
It's not necessary, but it is an added benefit. It does allow that crankcase to breathe a little bit, and if you let it breathe, there's just benefits involved with it. So I would run it. We don't typically run 5 quarts of oil in these motors. We're running a little over 4 quarts in them, which helps out as well. It gives it a little bit more area for air to move around in there.
Yeah, it does build up more crankcase pressure because you have more surface area.
Yeah, there's just more room for air.
Yeah.
So, you know, it allows it to do what it needs to do. Plus, the more oil you put in to your oil pan, the more oil you're also flowing into your cam chest, and you're filling that up higher, which isn't always good. So 4.3 quarts is a great rule of thumb for these high horsepower motors.
And that meme with that mechanic guy, you don't have to run one, but it helps.
All the chicks.
It looks good. It's nice. It's got a little vent.
Yeah.
Does all the
It
cool
does look
stuff.
pretty good on there, though.
And the best
it
part,
looks like racy as hell.
get all the chicks.
Buy it. We
That's
make
right.
them in polished, right, and then black.
Yep.
Yeah.
We got them in stock. If you need one, call us.
and
Yeah,
you
and
can run
Fueling's
it-
done a lot of work on those.
You can run it also with the vent that goes up to the breather, or they also sell it with a little tiny breather cap, basically, that screws onto it if you don't want lines and everything hanging off your bike. So
Mike just wanted me to answer the question because I walk around with them.
all the
And-
time, he's
yeah.
like
He
got them in
does.
his pockets. I think he whips
So I
them
just-
out once in a while and goes, look what I got.
Need them to make me a pen out
And
of
these
that.
have a cool display too.
Luke, make me a pen.
Every build, did you sell the vent kit? Yes.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to go back to my office.
All right, so I got the next question. Some of these I don't really have names on all of them. This one says, is there any reason you would want to get an S&S 465 cam rather than a 475 for an Milwaukee 8 114?
Yes. Yes. And again, it goes back to where we started this whole thing. Again, it depends whether or not we're talking about a high compression 114 or a stock compression 114. And if you're a high comp, 475 is great. If you're a standard compression, stock compression bike, unless you like the idea of hitting the throttle at 2,000 RPM and not having it really turn on until 3,000 RPM, I'd go with the 465 because that's what a 475 is going to do in a stock compression 114.
I love the S&S 465.
It's a great
It's a
cam.
beast.
Torquiest,
On the bottom, on the stock,
torquiest
yeah.
114 cam that we've tested so far. So your
Yeah,
two-up
on a
guys,
soft tail or something, they
Yeah, it
they
rips, man.
rip, man.
We sell so many of those, and wasn't S&S like, how are you guys selling those? Nobody even buys them
Well,
from the website because they just see that bigger is better, and it's not the
Yeah.
case.
Well, because everyone buys the 475
Yeah.
and it's a dog off the line.
and how many bikes have we done with a guy with a 107 or a 114 that comes in with a 475 cam? How do I fix this? Well, there's two ways. We either change the cam or we put a 124 on it. It's up to you.
Yeah,
What
we
do you wanna
usually
do?
just say, just do it.
They just do the pistons. Boom. They
Yeah,
got
the-
pistons.
yeah.
And
Rock
the
and roll
24
fixes
you're
it.
fixed.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the reason for going to 124 is you're spending all the money to do a high comp 114 otherwise if you were
Right.
just going to do a high comp.
Yeah.
So the money is spent the same. It's just silly not to go with like a
Do-
124 or something.
Do they still make high comp 114s and 117s?
I haven't seen them.
Like 2 years.
That's so 2018.
Well, a rule of thumb, don't buy a bigger cam than a 472 if you have stock motor.
Yeah.
Stock pistons, 472 or smaller.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even like just the lift, don't look at just the lift on the cam because that 246 is a 472 lift cam.
There's only a few professions where bigger's better.
You've been involved?
No,
Lies.
no,
Lies.
I don't qualify.
Going
All right.
back to the beginning where we started, then ultimately look at the intake close time on your cam and
No, call us. Tell
Yeah.
us the results you want. We package everything up for the job. Your O-ring seals, everything that you want so you don't have to run back to your Harley dealer. And we send you a box that makes horsepower for what you want.
And we
with
run that
everything in it,
machine
every
24
O-ring,
hours
every
a day.
gasket, everything that you need will be in that box. There'll be nothing left to chance.
Well, we talk to a lot of guys and they buy a part from here, a part to there, this and that, and they don't build these every single day. And they go to put their stuff together and like, I don't have this gasket, I don't have this O-ring, I'm missing this. When we do this setup, we build them all day long. So we're gonna give you every piece you need So you can sit down with the parts we send you. You can pull your motorcycle apart, finish it all in one stop without having to run to your local Harley dealer, call a parts store, and get your stuff.
And you've got to go into this with a game plan.
Like primary gaskets that are impossible to ship.
I'm not sure what Mike said, but yeah.
It's loud in here.
It's loud. We're still working.
All right, so I got another one.
And here,
Man, that got loud quick. It sounds so good.
Whoop ass! Whoop ass!
End scene.
Cut.
And the customers whose bike is here too,
Hey,
right?
Huh?
Is the customer whose bike is in the dyno, isn't he here too?
He was
Yeah,
here.
he's at
Yeah.
the hotel.
Okay.
He's got his window open at the hotel.
And then he realized bars in Tennessee are open. So he's like, I'm going.
Yeah.
I'm going. Outdoor mask. Okay, I'm going.
So, what can you recommend for a Screaming Eagle 131 kit with a D&D Billet Cat loud baffle, and do you recommend going with bigger injectors? So, I guess he's
Probably on a 5.5.
Is he talking about what cam I would assume?
Woody would upgrade.
yeah. Well, probably what you would if somebody wanted to do a Screaming Eagle 131 kit, how would you do a Screaming Eagle 131 kit?
Put a 538 cam in it probably.
I would not do that kit, and I would call Moonshine Harley
Yeah.
and do their 131 kit.
Better answer. Or a 128.
We don't have a
Now,
whole.
if he's already got the kit installed in his bike,
Yeah.
we would swap cam and lifters.
And
you know.
injectors.
We have different lifters. We have the normal lifters that are your $200-some lifters, and then we do lifters that are $130 a lifter. You know, it just depends on what you want. The more expensive ones are a little nicer. There's multiple different things out there, and we want to give you all the options when you upgrade that guy. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to swap the cam on that guy. We're going to swap lifters on that guy. We're going to put adjustable push rods on that guy. Then the intake manifold. If you have the Screaming Eagle heads, it comes with their manifold. We have a manifold, the Moonshine horsepower 66, we would add to those heads. If
Yeah.
you want more than that, we would then take the factory Harley CNC ported heads, put a little bigger valve in them. We would hand finish them so it's like a mirror polish in your combustion chamber and your exhaust ports, and just fine tune that intake inlet as well. And then we have options for larger cams on that 131.
Yeah.
We would step it above, like a 550 would be the baseline, and then we would go up. We have a couple choices that we like on those motors that we go. So you got a couple different options there.
But I mean, directly to his question already, he's like, what cam do you recommend on a 131? What do you guys think?
We mentioned it, 538.
I'm into that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And those Moonshine those the new Screaming Eagle heads, what are they, the stage 5 or stage 4 heads or whatever that they're calling those?
Yeah, they're nice.
They're not bad for a budget set of heads.
The combustion chamber is really well done.
Yeah, and they definitely, their original Screaming Eagle heads and the new stage 4 heads, they definitely did a lot of homework. And I think that they probably might have got their hands on some of the R&D that some of us out here have done with flow benching, you know, the stock heads, and they've incorporated a lot of that. So, you know, the nice thing about Harley Davidson is they are within the confines of what they're allowed to do by the laws that inhibit them.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to do their best to take care of their customers, because there are a lot of people that are nervous about building bikes like this and rolling the dice on your warranty. And there aren't a lot of shops that do what we do all the time and have our own performance warranty that's good everywhere in the country. So,
Well, there's a lot of questions on that, and I don't think you guys wrote it down, but the factory warranty, the cutoff is pretty much as soon as you put an aftermarket tuner on your bike, you're losing your powertrain, and that's gone. We have a warranty we've worked on for 2 years to finally get it. We have it available. If you buy it, you're going to add, let's say you buy your bike right now, it's got 2 years of warranty on it, right out of the box. You bought it today. You have 2 years. You came to us, you bought our warranty. You have an option to take your warranty from 2 to 3, 4, or 5. So we're going to add 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years to your factory warranty. If something breaks because you have an aftermarket tuner and you have our performance coverage warranty through us, it's not a warranty, it's not free, you pay for it, so it's our performance coverage. If you have that and Harley denies a claim in your first 2 years, we're going to piggyback on top of it and cover it, $0 deductible.
yeah.
And it's recognized in all 50 states.
Yeah, by any Harley-Davidson dealership. So if they say they don't accept it, they just need to call. We can walk them through. They can call us, get a hold of myself or Aaron, or we'll give you paperwork on it that has a phone number and everything for claims to be called. $0 deductible, parts and labor. Super cool setup for you guys
Yeah.
wanting to do something.
And
When I was in Guam, they called stuff like that the balls. It's the balls.
And that's not the balls part, but the warranty part is relevant for this guy particularly because if you change your cam with the D&D Big Bore,
Yeah, you will not be able to use.
be able to tune it with the Screaming Eagle from
Right.
a street tuner. You're going to be way out of the operational parameters of what that tuner is going to be able to deal with. So you're looking at a Power Vision or a TTS or something like that.
And we have encountered people that have tried to go that route with dealerships that didn't realize that you can't just slap whatever parts you want on these and send them down the road. And it's frustrating for us and for the customers, and I'm sure for the dealers, because by the time we get involved, you know, you're hours and hours and hours and thousands of dollars, and this other shop has got egg all over their face, and it's terrible. It's terrible for everybody. So when you talk to them, if they don't sound confident, just make sure that you go somewhere that does.
Yeah, and back to that last guy's question on it was 131. I think we forgot to mention, if you have the Screaming Eagle tuner setups on that, you're going to have to swap those out for one of the tuners we mentioned at the beginning of this video. That's something you'll have to do as soon as you do that. So if you think your 131 is still going to be covered under factory warranty or something because you bought it when you purchased the bike inside that custom coverage, it's not if you upgrade it.
Right.
You need to keep it the way they sell it with the tuner included. So you can't just sneak that cam in there without a tuner and keep that warranty.
You'll do a lot more damage than good, for sure, trying to do it that way. Did we skip the twin cam question, Roy?
I was actually circling back to
I'm
that
excited
one.
about the twin
yeah.
cam question.
I know. So yeah,
Questions
yeah.
before us.
We have the same list here.
You have the questions?
We gave our questions to him.
So
Want to see my cheat
He's
sheet?
got notes over here.
it seems
Did
like
homework.
everyone is on M8s because obviously that's the thing right now. You know, the question is basically, he wants to build the perfect 110 bagger. You know, there's a lot of 110 baggers out there right now. And he wants to know what's the, a good setup for a 110 bagger. What can you do with a 110 twin cam?
I can answer
to
this
really
one. Like
to
Duke?
really get good.
Trade it in for an M8 bagger. I'm just kidding.
You can still answer it though. Take it.
Well, no, he's been waiting for this. This is Aaron's.
Was yours?
Yeah, I
You
mean,
said you've been waiting. Let's do this.
I want to talk about this one.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it.
Well, even though Mike just made that last comment, Aaron won't get rid of his twin cam.
No.
Nope.
We've tried.
I'm taking one last swing at it. This is it. After this is done,
Yeah,
then I'll
we
be
had
M8
we had
bound,
two
but-
cameras, so you can see it right here on the lip. But I think he's a union worker and he took a break.
Well, it was there
No,
last
he's
winter
back there
too.
having cocktails.
No, I think he's just staring like, who are you talking about, me? Yeah, he is. The camera's sitting on the desk and he's back there going, who are you talking about? Who has the other camera? Go ahead.
So I was really impressed with that twin cam setup that we did for Mr. Duke.
Oh, yeah.
110 cubic inches, ported heads,
Yep.
like 10 7-to-1 compression, so super nice pump gas friendly bike with an SNS 585 cam. And what did it have on it for a pipe? Was it a DX header or was it an SNS header? I can't remember.
Yeah, he did the SNS dual.
Yeah, I mean, just great rideability, super good linear curve. I mean, usually you don't see that kind of stuff except for in M8s, and Mike was able to create just this really beautiful linear curve, and the guy was really happy with it until he traded it in for an M8 recently, which he did. But no, man, like I hear from a lot of people that they want to hear more about twin cams. There's still a lot of them out there.
We just did a 2015 Ultra today that we did. It had a Harley Stage 5 tire shredder. We took the Screaming Eagle exhaust off. We put D&D Borzilla on it and a Wood 999 6 cam, and super solid.
590.
Yeah, I think it's a 590 lift
590
cam.
Yeah, so pretty similar to what you'd see on a 585. A little bit more duration, a little bit later close, but super nice setup, man. It sounded wicked too.
Well, then we build the motors for the guys that have like the lowrider S's. We don't have to go crazy on those 110s to make them rip.
No.
That's what I ride, and we had the dyno shootout, and I was just tearing up bikes that had bigger motors, and it's just high compression pistons we put in that guy with a gear drive Andrews cam in it.
Yeah.
And that 110 rips. I love mine. I mean, I re-geared it a little bit. That gave me the advantage on the horsepower shootout or the dyno shootout, but just solid motor with stock heads, runs good. Everyone always wants the sound. They sound great, and super, super solid.
But for your touring bike, if you're really focused on a good touring 110 setup, and you're not going to go like what we were just talking about, like what Mr. Duke did, and you're not going to port the heads, you're not going to put a big 58 millimeter or throttle body on it or something like that, don't overcam the bike. Call us, we'll go through it and get you set up on something that's going to make really good torque, because more than likely if you're touring, you're going to be heavily loaded. You may maybe riding 2 up. So you're not going to want that bike like we talked about before that turns on at like 3,000 RPM, or you're going to be on and off the clutch. Again, kind of going back to what one of these other guys were talking about, where they want to buck and kick and they don't want to make good torque and just let the clutch out and roll the throttle on and move. We can help you avoid that.
Well, and there's 5 different cam categories we get into when we're building these motors, which is why you really got to know. One is stock compression. Okay, you have certain cams that we run on stock compression. The next one is when you have high compression motors with stock heads. We have a certain realm of cams we stay in. The next one, we go to heads. With standard pistons you see in most of the guys' kits, you have a certain quantity of cams you can run. The next one is when you want high-end horsepower cams for the street. We're going to pick out that cam setup. And then the last one is if you're racing, just want all-out power. That's another category. So there's
My fingers got tired.
the cams go from lift kind of, and intake, closing, and different things like duration in there, and valve overlap and center lines that are going to be different on each one of those, and you need to do them. Most pistons that come out of the box on, like a lot of guys are doing a 128 kit from S&S, 124 kit from S&S, they make a certain amount of corrected compression with the heads we can put on. We can deck them, but there's certain cams you can't run in that setup just because the piston doesn't have enough dome or volume to compress the air inside of a head, and you can't deck the head enough to get it down to where you need to go with a aftermarket high compression custom piston for that setup.
And
we
likewise,
have those kits.
And likewise, when you have a smaller cam and you start increasing displacement, you add compression because of the displacement. You know, people don't realize that a 10.5 to 1 on a twin cam, a 10.5 to 1 117 and a 10.5 to 1 103, they have the same compression ratio, but the volume of air that you're moving is tremendously increased on a 117. So you can't run the same valve setup, you can't run the same cam, the same lift, you can't run all that stuff on those 2 motors because the volume of air is what you're trying to move. You're trying to maximize how much air you can get in the engine, squeeze, ignite, and get back out.
Absolutely. And we have a couple kits designed that when you want to run these high-end numbers, get a little bit more out of them, want to get above that 150, 155 horsepower range on a 131 or a 128, we build a 130 with a pop-up piston for different cam setups. We have that same piston that goes in that stroker S&S, which it comes out to like a 133 setup. We're a little backlogged on those. If you want one of those kits, let us know. We'll price them out. We'll get you in line. But it's a good 4 to 8 weeks out right now, depending on the exact build of what you want to do on those. But we have those pistons developed for cams that you don't typically see in any of our charts or anything we're currently doing.
All right, so we'll move on to the next one. This one's from Tom Ellis. Which head pipe do you like and why? Now, he lists, the Jackpot, the Full Sack, Vance & Hines X pipe, and he has a 2019 Road Glide Special with Reinhardt 4-inch DBX slip-ons.
Take it away.
I
This
have
one
a
is
prop
yours.
down here.
No.
We don't want to show it?
Just go ahead.
We would run. Where
They're
would you run,
different.
Mike?
They're different. The Jackpot header and the Full Sack are different. We'll leave it at that, I suppose, just to say one is better than the other.
We
in our
have
testing.
It depends on what motor and what your budget is too.
I couldn't really hear you, but I did hear Vance & Hines X pipe, and I would not run that ever
Yes.
on any motorcycle that I ever had.
Yeah.
I don't talk negatively about manufacturers that often, but all I do is take those pipes off.
Yeah. A lot.
What
The
about
other ones, I'm not really sure.
What What about the DBX slip-ons?
Well,
So
they're
what
not too
would you
bad. You're
recommend?
going to want to make sure that you have the correct baffling for your setup. The mufflers aren't as crucial as the primaries, as long as the mufflers have the length and you are running baffles. When you take the baffles out and just run this big open can because you love how obnoxious it sounds, you're taking the whole reason to have all of that stuff in there out.
well, there's a pipe on here that we run that we don't talk about. So we have the Moonshine Pro Stock header that is similar to all these. And after installing all these for a long time on the M8s, we saw areas for improvement. And some of these systems on here are really good, and we recommend them. We run that full sack a lot on these smaller motors.
Yeah.
114 down, we run the full sack, and it does exactly what our pipe does on those motors. Our exhaust pipe is that full sack on steroids.
Right.
So it's bigger. We've moved the chamber to a different location back a little bit, and it outperforms pretty much everything else we've tested against
Yep.
on this paper.
Do you want to talk about the advantage of one versus the other? Why?
Well, I mean,
Somebody
gonna run
just
a full
chimed in
sack.
and said they were listening from 36,000 feet.
They were listening from 36,000 feet.
Somebody's listening
What
in an
did you say?
airplane.
They're flying?
Oh, nice.
Interesting. Sorry, had to throw that out there.
So the advantages, realistically, between a well-designed header in a 212 are going to be two things: your primary length and your merge, where those two pipes come together. Some pipes treat that merge in maybe what we'd say a little bit of a haphazard way, where it's maybe not as well thought out as some other head pipes. And a well-designed head pipe is going to have a really nice merge. It's going to have a certain amount of volume or area inside the merge to where it splits off and goes to its own separate exhaust if it's a 212. Same kind of idea in a 2-into-1 header, like this one is very, very well designed. You'll see something very similar to this kind of deal on our header and on a full sack. You compare that to another 2-into-1, you may not see something like what's in this area of the pipe right here.
Well,
That's why we like them.
I think we should go over why. Why don't we see that in other pipes?
There's, I guess, several concerns, right? Packaging on the bike. A lot of them are trying to fit it behind a stock heat shield.
Well, I don't think it's
And then
packaging, because
manufacturing
we can,
cost?
well, we can make them fit behind it. It all comes down to dollars. To do something hand done, hand fitted, hand finished after they weld it is going to cost a lot more than a box that's stamped.
Yep.
And then they weld the pipes to it, and just fits together, and the machine goes rubs around it, and no one cleans the slag off inside.
Yeah.
There's just a lot different process on there. So to get a really nice merge collector, a really nice X chamber, it's time extensive. And anytime they're spending more time building something, the prices increase with it. Yeah. So the nicer those parts get, they're usually more money. So the other companies that have the ones that are a very good deal, they're a budget, it's because they made them efficiently, quickly, so they can sell them cheaper, sell more of them, but it doesn't mean it's going to outperform the other ones. The more expensive ones are hand done. A couple guys are doing them in their shop, like the full sack shop. There's literally 2 guys that build every single one of those pipes. They're backlogged forever.
They're not made in China.
And they're not made in China. Our pipe, I'd have one here to show you guys, but we're sold out. We have 50 more on their way. Yeah. We'll go over those and show them to you. I thought we had one, but I think Aaron sold it. We
every
installed
time,
it.
As soon as we get them in, they're gone.
They are gone quick. Yes. That never gets old, does it?
No.
It sounds
love it.
great.
I think it gets old for the hotel, like 1 in the morning.
Well, my bay is right behind
I
you.
thought about that
I
today.
don't know if you're talking.
That goes, and I'm like, man,
Your
that's
lips are
loud.
moving, but I can't hear a word you're saying.
All right, so we'll move on to the next one.
You gotta be louder, Roy. We can't hear you at all.
We'll move on to the next one.
Oh, hey! Leave it there. Leave it there.
Wait.
Hey.
All right, so the
Hands
question
above the
is from Jeff Zook. Can you please go over the tuning benefits
can't hear
You were
you.
perfect.
You're
were
perfect.
of
Get-
wideband
hey,
O2
go
sensors?
to the right.
You
go
have
to the
you
right.
have headphones on.
Go
We
to the
don't.
right. Right there. Talk.
Right there.
Don't touch it
Yeah.
anymore.
All right, so go over the tuning benefits of wideband O2 sensors.
What's this guy?
Well, there aren't really any tuning. Whoa, we're all louder. There aren't really any tuning benefits to wideband. The benefits to a wideband sensor would be if you can't get a good dyno tune to where you can utilize the benefits of a narrowband sensor, then I would run a wideband. Now, we do some tunes where we'll tune the bike and then install a wideband sensor, but it's really not that necessary, because what a wideband sensor does is it collects the O2 data from, I think, 11 to 18 AFR parts to like 11 to 1 to 18 to 1 AFR ratio, where a narrowband runs from 13 to 15. But the nice thing about a narrowband setup is when you're cruising, you can tune it for really good gas mileage, but when you're really trying to get on it, you're not relying on the O2 data to try to catch up and make changes to your map. So you can set up an aggressive throttle table for high RPM, full throttle setups, which is hard to do on a wideband, because a wideband is always trying to correct your air-fuel ratio all the time.
You mentioned something, catch up. Explain for people, because you had to explain it to me a while ago, the lag that occurs in the transient conditions in a motor. There's lag, right?
Yeah.
In the data coming in, the correction, the computer processes it, moves it in, and by that point, it's too late.
Yeah, especially when you're accelerating and you're looking at the tachometer and you're going 25, 27, 3,000, 32, 35. Well, when you hit each one of those RPM ranges on a wideband system, it takes the data that it collects and it says it's either running rich or it's running lean, and now I need to make this big of a correction to get to my master table, so I'm going to change it this much and I'm going to input that into the ECM. The only problem is you're already past that RPM level by the time it makes the correction. So you're actually moving ahead of the O2 sensor in a hard acceleration event on a wideband sensor, and it never makes an accurate data collection because it's not behind by very much, maybe a half of a millisecond or whatever, but you're never sitting steady. So they're only accurate at steady throttle, which is the same thing that a narrowband does. When you're at a steady throttle and the narrowbands are turned on, they then take over and make all the corrections to optimize your fuel mileage. But as soon as you start moving rapidly through the RPM range, the narrowbands turn off and it goes strictly on your air fuel table. And it never tries to make any corrections to it.
No.
And in your tuning strategy, you're still using the narrowband, so you're still able to make the corrections for temperature and altitude and all those kind of things.
Right.
While you're in part throttle.
And the easiest way to explain it is your bike comes out of the box from, York, PA, and they're all over the country. And you don't have to get your bike retuned if you're living in Colorado or you're in Florida or Texas or Louisiana, because those O2s can make that much change for altitude and everything else. They're not going to retune your bike with it if you add a new component, but they can handle all the elements of elevation, whatever it needs to while riding in the US for the most part. Go over memory of a wideband system.
I don't remember. What do you mean?
Like
memory?
eventually, after learning all the tunes,
Oh,
it resets for the most part. The easiest way to explain it, it has to reset because it kind of runs out of memory.
Yeah, because it's constantly trying to rewrite the map. So over time, it just becomes more and more convoluted. And one of the most notorious systems for that is a Thundermax. If a Thundermax is not tuned real well, it's constantly rewriting the map and saving it to its new file. Well, just like any computer, if you just keep saving files and saving files and saving files, eventually it stops being able to rewrite it and it starts having runnability issues. And they're a little bit better now than they were, but the fix was just to wipe it out.
Now, it's not a bad system. We like Thundermax. It's the best one that we use to tune these, but
and you should still tune it.
Tune it is
Yeah,
gonna make
very
a big
common
difference.
misconception
Yeah.
is that they need to be dyno tune based maps so that
Right.
you're starting off of a table that's correct.
Because the closer you are to matching that table without relying on the O2 sensors to get you there, the better the bike is going to perform.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to go over.
Okay, so the next question, it says, "Good day, boys. I watch your videos all the time and really love and appreciate the effort and stuff you produce. But I'm up here in Canada and really want some work done. Is there some recommended brothers up here that you could honestly refer me to, or is it cheaper to go down there to buy?"
This is all JB.
Well, it might not be cheaper, but we're going to tell you come here. We don't have a shop that we deal with all the time up there. that is going to stand behind their work like we do. We go over stuff. The stuff we're doing this month on some motors might be different than stuff we did 6 months ago. We're coming out with our own setups. We're coming out with new pistons, new cams, stuff we see that works better. We don't know if other shops are doing that. We have some other shops we play well with in the U.S. There's a select few, but we don't really have anyone in Canada.
And we test a lot of products. You know, we have the ability to see what performs better when a new clutch comes out. We can put it in a bike and see how we like it.
Absolutely. I mean, if there's someone up there that's well recommended and you feel comfortable with them doing it, yes. We just don't have someone that we're like, hey, they built 10 bikes for guys we sent there. Everything's been perfect. So unfortunately, we don't. We do a lot of builds for guys in Canada, though. We have a lot. I think we have probably 2 or 3 motor builds.
Wadge, where you at?
Yeah, Wadge, we still have your stuff, buddy. We're waiting on you. I should check on you again. It's been like 3 months. COVID has stopped him from coming down here for a little bit, so he's got to plan a new trip. But we'll take care of you. Call the shop. Ask for Aaron. He is hard to get. We go from one customer to another customer.
Yeah.
Nick, who's not in the video, is awesome. If you can't get to either of those guys, you can ask for me. Yeah, all 3 of us. You know. And then Mike, you'll never get.
Yeah, Mike's putting out fires all day, every day.
He's not putting out fires. He's looking for the parts you hid under your desk.
Yeah, those are the fires. The fires I'm putting out is like, what? We're not putting this on a motorcycle.
Don't look at me. Do not look at me.
It could be in my office.
I think you and Nick were standing by his desk today when he was running that one, and I said, I know you guys hate me. I don't care.
It's a fact. That's exactly how it went down, just like that.
Yeah, most of the stuff Mike's trying to do is organize the shop to make sure these parts are coming in.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to get a motor. They want heads and everything, and they think it takes 2 days to port and polish heads and get everything in.
Yeah.
And then, you know, stuff is showing up on time like normal, and all of a sudden UPS gets backed up, and it throws our timeline off. So a lot of Mike's job is to make sure everything's here when you arrive with your machine.
Mm-hmm.
All the parts get put on, and you can go home exactly how we told you. So you just make sure that happens. Yeah.
And to crack the whip on these badass techs, tell them you're not going home. You still need to go in the dyno.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we just upgrade that bad boy.
Yep.
All right,
It's like
so
a jet and just like a fan for a 747.
I have one that's come in tonight here, and he has got a
Turn down the thing again.
Yeah.
You got to turn it up every time and turn it down.
Sorry. Oh man, I think I can hear that in your mics.
Yeah.
I have a 2018 Street Glide with a 22XE cam and jackpot headers. Will a 124 work with that, and what kind of power might I see? So
Yes.
so with that 22X, would that work with a 24? You know,
The
jackpot
XE.
header, the XE. Yeah.
XE is a different cam.
Yeah. Is it a 22X or a 22XE?
XE.
Yeah,
That's
they
a
work.
really good cam. And I believe Fuel Moto worked with Wood to develop that just recently for that application. They came out with one of those hybrid cams that'll work with a stock configuration, and you can later upgrade it. So that is a pretty good setup.
Yeah, it's real similar to a 472.
Yeah.
Real similar. So it's
Yep.
going to work on a stock 114, a stock 117, then carry it over to a lower compression like a 10.75 to 1 to 11.1,
Yeah.
124, 128. Would you put a 40,000 head gasket on an S&S kit for that, or would you run the 30?
I run it 11 to 1.
I'd probably run the 30 would put it at 10.75, right? Corrected. So I would probably just run the kit,
Yeah.
the S&S kit.
So we got a lot of questions coming in.
Thanks, guys.
One of them here that
Turn it
was
up.
on our list is, they were kind of asking what actually gets done when tuning a motorcycle. Do you tune each gear or just the top gear? What are we paying for? What makes a Power Vision tune on a dyno better than an FP3 tune? And I know we talked about this a little bit, but I figured you might be able to elaborate just a little bit more.
It's a good question too. It's all Mike. Right after a dyno bolt.
there's your answer.
This is the end. This is the end of the tune.
And by end of the tune, what he means is that he's doing his full pulls.
You turned it down again.
We can't hear you.
I said what you meant there was that he's doing his full pulls, and you
Yes.
can hear that back there that he's giving it hell, if you
Yeah.
will.
Well, it's because we're not doing a full pull the whole time you're tuning.
Right. So what we do is when you pay for a dyno tune from an actual tuner, they're going to tune your bike.
In 2 years, Aaron will hear that, and there'll be his bike
So-
in there. 2 more years?
2 more years.
2 more years, that one will be in there?
So what you're going to do is tune the bike at at different RPM ranges to make sure that you're running an optimal air-fuel ratio at idle, just off idle, at low speed, cruising, mid-range, top end, and then we also do it at different loads. So if you are, to say it simply, if the bike is going on flat ground, it's going to have the same fuel ratio as if you're going up a hill. Unless, when you go up to a steeper grade or you give it more throttle, you need more fuel to keep the engine cool. So everything is tuned in pieces to put it together. And if you've noticed, the dyno's been running the whole time we've been in here, and he started about an hour before we started on here. And he's now starting to do pulls where he's going all the way from idle to redline, which is why we can't talk while he's doing it. So that's the very end, is tuning your full wide open throttle. And we adjust air fuel, we adjust the exhaust gas reversion in the heads, we adjust the timing, we adjust startup fuel, we adjust the decel so that it doesn't you don't have a bunch of afterburn, so it goes pop, 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 pop when you let off the throttle. You notice it's got a really nice smooth decel as he's just coasting back down. So it's pretty comprehensive. And a tuner like the FP3 can do some of that. It's very difficult to dial an FP3 down to be able to do 1-point corrections. They do not eliminate the speed governor. There's a lot of things the FP3 does not do. And it's not designed to be a comprehensive tuner like a Power Vision or a TTS.
Well, not just that, but like if you don't get the fuel air ratio right, the bike can run hotter than you'd want it to run. So if it's running lean at your cruising speed, like let's say you're cruising at 2,700 RPMs and that tuner has a little leaner than it should, you're creating more heat than you should. Mm-hmm. And heat's what you don't want. We want to stay away from as much heat as possible. So it is cheaper to get an FP3. We recommend tuning everything.
And I wanted to expand really quick too and go back to something that he talked about and talk about a really important component of the tuning. He brought it up, and that's load control. That's what you're paying for in that room, in addition to a competent tuner that knows what he's doing. If you take a tuner out and you ride it down the street, you are not going to have the ability to put a load on the rear tire and control it at an RPM. You're going to have ups and downs in the road, right? You're going to have all these different variables that are going to affect the ultimate load that the bike sees. So it makes it very, very difficult to narrow down on 5% load, 10%, et cetera, up and down the scale to create that proper AFR that Mike and Shane and Jordan are looking for. So while they're in the room, that's what they're doing.
So the short answer to the dyno tuning question, and I know we've talked to a lot of customers about this, is you are calibrating the ECM. Mm-hmm. The ECM does not have the ability to actually know what is coming in the intake. It uses references like throttle position and things like that and a predetermined table to figure that out. So when you let more air in, the computer doesn't actually know.
Right.
And ultimately, that base map and the computer only has so much adjustability on its own. And if you are not close enough, that computer will not be able to get you there on its own. Mm-hmm. So you have to get you into that window, that 10, or I think it's 8% either way or something they say that thing will do. So you got to get yourself pretty close and calibrate that ECM so that when it says it wants 14.2 air ratio, it's going to get 14.2 air ratio out of the tailpipe. And that's the short answer,
Yep.
But
Another thing I want to go over on the tuners are the piggyback tuners that stay installed on the bike, right? So you have a circuit board in there that's installed on the bike that's produced as cheaply as possible for the most part. So the plastic little box isn't as tight as, let's say, the ECM of the motorcycle. So the elements to one of those piggyback tuners, the elements can get to that tuner a lot easier than it can to the factory setup. The factory setup is a lot different than that little tiny box you're putting on your bike. We've seen multiple guys be at bike night, be at bike week, be at their house, wash the bike, go through a big rainstorm, bike start running bad. We've all seen it. So then once that happens in that piggyback tuner, it fries and you're not getting the tune that you had a little bit ago. Okay, and then there's something else we see a lot where a guy has a problem with a bike and he goes to a shop and the shop tells him his bike lost his tune. I've heard it multiple times over the years. How many times have you heard that?
Can't say I've ever heard that, John.
I want to know, Connie.
We've had multiple customers have shops say that. So when they tell you that, it never loses your tune from
That-
like a TTS or a Power Vision.
That or can you check my tune?
Well, it can't.
That or can you check my tune?
Yeah, I sure can. Does the bike start? It has a tune.
It has a tune.
We've had that plenty of times. It happens a couple times a year where the shop can't figure out what's wrong with the bike. They blame it on your bike lost your tune. You need to buy a new tuner and do it. You're like, okay, cool. I'm fed up. I'm ready. Here's the tune. Retune my bike, and guess what? They don't fix it. It doesn't fix it. And then they want to blame everything else. So
Yeah, if your bike is running good and then all of a sudden it's not the ECM, most likely. It's probably an input sensor. If it is an ECM that's faulty, then whatever input sensor the ECM is no longer reading, you're retuning the bike or reloading a tune or finding the lost tune is not going to fix that issue.
now there is a problem if you have a piggyback tuner. It could happen because that piggyback tuner, that device, water gets in, that goes. That's
if it gets
different than
broken.
retuning your factory.
And those are
tuner.
usually pretty easy to find because all you need to do is unplug it. And if you unplug it and whatever condition it had before is no longer there,
Boom.
Found it.
then you need to call us and we will dyno tune the bike with a Power Vision.
All right, so we'll move on to another one that we got tonight. This is a question that we get so much, and I'm interested to see your answer. And that's, what's the best loud bagger exhaust that doesn't give up bottom end?
Depends what motor,
Yeah.
but it would be the big bore.
Yeah, probably the
D&D.
D&D.
D&D,
big bore.
loud.
Made in
super
It
loud.
Texas.
never shuts up. I mean, that is a loud pipe.
It's a
Yes.
It's the loudest pipe I think I've ever heard.
yeah,
That's
when it's in
awesome
the
though, man.
dyno, we couldn't even do this right now.
Yeah.
If it was in the dyno.
And they're made in the great state of Texas.
Texas,
God
love it.
bless Texas.
They're awesome. We run them a lot. So the change on that pipe compared to the billet cat is the muffler.
Yeah.
But
That's
I
the
would
difference.
not run that pipe on a stock 107, 114, something like that.
Yeah.
You're asking for it. It's just not going to have the speed in the muffler to be able to support torque on the bottom.
So I have so many questions here from people
I love it.
that are all so similar, and they want to know how much is a build. And they give
Man.
their bike, and they give, and this is a question that we get so much,
Call me.
is I want the answer quickly. You know, what do you recommend? What
if
is
you
it?
call me, I can give you a pretty roundabout
Well,
Yeah.
I'll
answer.
give them a good baseline. So, some guys will quote just the motor or this. So if you have a stock bike, you just bought a brand new one, nothing on it, and you want to do a big bore motor build with the exhaust, intake, tuner, all the stuff you need, some of the clutch upgrades we do, you're starting around $7,000 for a big bore kit with everything.
Yeah.
And it goes up from there. So stock heads, it can be 7 to 10 with everything, and that's the tensioner, sometimes this guy, a recluse clutch, then the motor build, intake, exhaust, and tuner. Just between an intake, exhaust, and tuner, you can have $3,000 to $3,500 wrapped up in that stuff
Yeah,
by the time it's
depending
on
on-
the tune
depending
before we
on
ever
your-
do a build. So that adds the cost. Now, if you have a D&D and you have an intake and you already bought a Power Vision, it's been tuned, shoot, you just got $3,000 out of that $7,000 out of the way.
Yeah.
So it depends what you have, but if you have nothing, it is a little more expensive. So big bore motors, of all the parts we do to hold together so you're not breaking stuff down the road, they start at 7 and they go to roughly 9, maybe 10 if someone goes crazy, get some of this stuff. And then when we add heads, they go up. And then when we add some of the big builds we do, like those high compression custom pistons, some total seal rings that have bending on top of the rings, the gas ports push them back. Those ring packs for more money, everything adds up. If they want their bike super bulletproof and we put cylinder studs or head studs in there, it adds up. You know, we're putting the head bolts in every build we do. It's just common practice for us if the kits don't come with them. But we're also studding them as well on these larger builds.
And you also
Rocker
talked
studs.
about some primary work, you know, clutches or whatever. There's some little things you do, you know, we do in those builds. Obviously, the more you want to do there, the more that goes up as well. But if you're not getting into that price range, building a 128 or something like that, there's probably stuff being left out.
Yeah.
Things that are gonna break afterwards. That's why we recommend the things we do, because we've seen them break, you know, multiple times. So people think that sounds like a lot of money, but what you're doing is you know, trying to get to a bike that is going to be reliable, and you're not going to worry about, you know, what's going to happen next or anything like that. So some people think that might sound really expensive, but there are a lot of little things in there that you probably don't know about. You know?
Well, we've also gone through where we've done builds and people will say, well, I don't need that. I don't ride that hard. And then the next thing you know, they break a compensator. Then they bring it back and we say, well, we recommend just bulletproofing the product. I don't need all that. Then they break a basket. Well,
Yeah, what was our record? I think 24 hours for a belt.
Oh, yeah, Patrick.
Yeah.
2
Came
hours.
back-
Patrick.
yeah, came back 24 hours later.
All I do is
roasted
ride on
a
the
belt.
highway. I sometimes do roll-ons. I ride with my guys. I rarely get on it. He did his test ride, popped 2 wheelies, and Nick and I were standing there and we're like, we totally underbuilt this guy's bike.
Well, we changed his name. Mayhem.
Yeah.
Mayhem.
Yeah.
So he took the bike home. The next day he says, man, I give it throttle and it doesn't go anywhere. We went and picked it up. He broke his compensator. So brought it back. We recommended bulletproofing his primary. He did it. Took it home. The next day, it's happened again. I can't believe it. You guys said this stuff was way better. Stripped all the teeth off his belt.
And what breaks in the compensator most of the time is this guy right here.
Yeah.
That piece. It's
Yeah.
a cast piece. And that's why when we got a lot of horsepower, we like this. There's no ramp set up, nothing for weight to leverage up onto and brake. It still offers dampening because of the polyurethane pucks that are inside it, but not to an extent like this, so you're not going to lose power and it won't fracture. It'll never fracture.
And Mayhem still said, well, I don't ride it hard. I mean, I'm not afraid of it, but I don't ride it hard. And he had skid marks on the bottom. He had D&Ds, and he had skid marks on the bottoms of his mufflers from where he dragged the mufflers because he wheelied so high.
Well, he
this
thought-
is his second day.
Trying to
He
12
thought everyone
back.
rode like that.
Yeah, and he was like,
He's like, all my
don't.
boys ride like that. That's
it's like
normal
everybody
for
ride
us.
with me.
You don't?
How we ride.
It's normal to me.
That wasn't hard. All of us were doing it. That's normal.
So you can do it in stages like that, which is not the most economical route to do it, or you can be honest and say, I want to push this thing to the very limit. What do I need to do?
I mean, put it in perspective. Just
And we
the
don't care,
primary
we don't-
gasket and the fluids
So,
would be $100.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna steer us in a little different direction here.
Wait, since we talked about this, let's go over this. We didn't talk about it earlier. I forgot. But there's a solid guy. So you have a solid guy, you have the Dark Horse, and then you have the Harley comp. This guy has the polyurethane bushings on either side of where these are bolted in. So when it goes, it presses those polyurethane bushings and gives a little cushion. When we decel, it's got them the opposite way on the other side. And we haven't seen any of them wear out, but you can replace those down the road. Let's say you're going to keep this bike forever. You can get those bushings, take it apart, replace it. The oil goes through it. They've done a very, very good job putting this piece together. It doesn't break, and it gives you cushion in there, so it's not as hard on your bike as, let's say, a solid comp. Since we started running these, unless it's a race bike, we don't put a solid comp in it.
Right.
No, the rideability definitely takes a suffer on a solid compensator.
And if you missed it earlier,
so-
these are louder.
Yeah.
The bike will be louder at idle.
Yes.
And you don't have to be at like a stage 3 to do this. We just did one to Jay Brown's bike. It's a stage 2 bike, and we put a compensator, a basket, and a recluse clutch. He already had the basket, but we upgraded it to the recluse clutch, this, and the hydraulic tensioner, and he said you could absolutely feel the difference
Oh,
in
sure.
how it moves power through the primary to the rear end of the bike. Far more responsive. It's lighter, so you'll feel it, get up on the pipe a little bit quicker. So it's a good thing.
All right, so the next one came in tonight, and it says, my question is, I remember in some previous content, I believe you talked about how lowering the front end of the motorcycle just a little bit will improve handling. Am I remembering this correctly, and does this work? Follow up that do I leave the rear suspension the same height, or do I, lower it as well? So basically, I think what they're looking at is what can I do to my suspension to make it handle better?
Did he put what bike?
No, but I'm gonna we'll say a Milwaukee 8, touring bike is gonna be mostly what we see the most of. So, talk about what you can do to your suspension on a touring bike to.
I'll start off with what the stock suspension is, and I'll let you guys take over. So if you're on a Road Glide Special or a Street Glide Special, compared to a Limited, a Road Glide Limited, or a full dresser with the Tour Pack on it from Harley, what a lot of guys don't realize is those bikes from the factory have an inch taller shock in the rear already. So a Special, a Street Glide Special, Road Glide Special, and a Road King Special are all an inch shorter in the rear. A regular Road King, a Limited, when we had the Ultras, a Road Glide Ultra, a Road Glide Limited, all start an inch taller in the back from the factory. So that's the first thing to kind of know where you're at and what you're starting with. And then from there, I'll let you take this. You do a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get a better grasp on really what's going to make your bike perform well, I don't think that you have to take it to the extreme that I'm about to mention, but I would look at what a racer does to his bike. And if you looked at, say you have a bagger, go look at what happened on King of the Baggers. What did we see there? You didn't see a single lowered bike at that race. And it's not because they were trying to get up in the wind more to keep themselves cool. It's because that's how you make those bikes handle.
Well, and it gives you more lean angle.
Lean angle, yep. And you can do a lot more too with the amount of travel that you have to deal with, and creating a right amount of suspension travel for your bike will improve the handling pretty substantially. And Sasha went through a bunch of that with us when he was with us. Your body positioning on the bike too is also a pretty critical thing, the way you have your bars set up. So it's not just the suspension. I think it's a sum of all the parts together that can help improve your handling. But
let's go over that.
were it mine, I wouldn't lower my front end.
Well,
No.
So actually, I will say something here, because there is a true statement in getting the rear end on a trike a little bit higher than the front. They do handle a little bit better, but not so much on two wheels.
Well, that's because they're raked.
Yeah,
That
correct,
one is a raked
right.
front end. It doesn't have the same rake as the regular bikes. But the one thing I see when I'm around guys riding is they can drastically improve the handling of their bike by moving their body on the bike. A lot of guys I see are sitting 2 to 3 inches farther back than I would recommend if you want your bike to handle well. There's multiple different things we can do with suspension if you can't change your riding position, but most guys are sitting way far back, they're leaned back, they have their hands up, and all their weight's on the back end. If you ever notice a motocross rider, he comes in the corner, he's sitting on the gas tank to hit that corner. Sitting on the gas tank, leg up, throwing the bike down to get the lean down. If you're on a sport bike, those bikes are designed for the rider to be leaning over the front end. Okay, so on the Harley, they're not designed for that, because we're getting into a new realm where we've noticed a lot of guys are coming off of sport bikes and they're getting on the Harley and they want the cool bike, they want the American bike, they want all the bells and whistles the Harley has to offer, the radio, the comfort, but then they want to thrash it. They want it to turn in a corner. They still want to be able to beat their buddies. The coolest thing we see is when we build one of our performance baggers and they beat a street bike. It's like they won the lottery that day.
Yeah.
I mean, so we're seeing that. So
We
what
hear
the
that.
Harley was 10 years ago and where it's been evolving now in the performance market, in the aftermarket market, and even Harley is paying attention to this stuff and coming out with different brakes, different setups. You're going to see a different Harley in the next several years as well. But riding position, get your seat pushed forward. Get your arms and stuff, instead of being so high, get them a little bit under your shoulders. Sacha Krause talked about it when he was here at our event. Bent elbows. You're going to have more stability if your arms are down compared to up. And that's going to start you there. Now, if you can't give up your riding position, you can go there. But I like my back straight up and down while I'm on my bike. I don't want to be hunched over. I want to be able to ride for a long time. So that's a good point. And then we can start tweaking the suspension from there.
Well, also another super simple ergonomic factor is your wheels. So many times you see people that want to go with a bigger wheel, that the bigger the wheel, the worse the handling gets. There's just no, you can say whatever you want. When you put a bigger wheel, it handles worse. And I think, and we talked about this with Sasha too, a 17-inch front wheel is the best handling wheel. That's why every sport bike in the world has a 17-inch front wheel. An 18 rear is the best, and the widest they ever go is 190. Because when you get too wide, you stop, the tires stop tracking in the same plane. So you get those big tire bikes, like they've done a pretty good job with the breakout by trying to balance that lean angle. But you know, the V-Rods, one of the worst things that they did with the V-Rod was put a 240 tire on it so it tries to stand up all the time. So they took this cool bike that they made as kind of a European styled racer and then just took all that away because they put a huge fat tire on it. And I had one. I mean, I had a Night Rod Special. I loved it, but man, it cornered like shit.
So I will add something in here because I think it's one of the most overlooked things that I see in my experience is the adjustable rear shock on the back of a Harley does actually give you some adjustability. And I think that probably at least 50% of the riders out there have no idea and do not adjust it to what they should be adjusting it at. So especially if you're a budget-minded person, sometimes starting with, you know, what you already have and maybe adjusting it will get you there.
Yeah.
Super expensive suspensions and things like that, like you guys said, you know, unless you're on the track, aren't always necessary, but an inexpensive suspension upgrade that is set up properly with rider sag and things like that, done by the right people, can vastly improve how your bike runs.
And good lightweight wheels.
Yeah, and the rims Mike was talking about is for guys going to the track. There's not 17s and 18s for baggers out there. So 19's your best. When you go to the 21, not only is it taller, it throws it off, it's a heavy wheel, unless you go with a BST. It's heavier. When we talked about that in that episode where we had Sacha Kraus here, suspension, the first thing I would do is a very nice rear shock. And we run them. There's different qualities of rear shocks. We do a lot of Legends, and we do a lot of Oleans. You know, Legends is here on pricing and the quality. Oleans is more expensive, a little nicer setup. If you're on a Street Glide or one of the bikes with an inch shorter shock, we're going to raise you back up, and it's going to help the front end there. If you're on an Ultra or Limited, we're going to pretty much stay with the same size shock. We're just going to increase the capabilities of the shock and the level of technicality that you have there and give you something that has a little bit more adjustments. If you can do front and back,
Do both.
you know,
Definitely.
when you do both, I mean, you're changing everything. So it's twice what you get with just one. If you can only afford one right now, I like the rear first and then the front. Sometimes if you are on a bagger though, a heavy bagger, and you are pushing it hard doing high speeds, I might tell you to do the front first on a big bagger like that if you're on the highway doing higher speeds, because the stock rear shock can handle it. It's going to be a little bit more abrupt when you hit stuff, but the front end's going to feel a lot more stable.
If you're using the adjustment that you have in it, you might be able to kind of fill that gap a little bit for sure. Because the front is a closed unit. There's nothing you're going to be able to do to it in a factory form, right? So.
Well, the one thing we see, I think, with that shock is they're typically under-adjusted, right?
It's squishy and soft.
Yep.
Under-adjusted. So when they sit on there, they lose an inch of suspension right off the bat just sitting on the bike.
When we do PDIs, I think we turn them to 5, but they go to like 15, right?
25.
Or 25.
I believe
Or
it's
something.
20.
You know, so I
it's
mean,
20.
I know those are just clicks, but that equals like 150 pounds of weight difference that shock is designed to be able to withstand.
And in the owner's manual, they actually give you weight ranges that you should set it at when you are, you know, one rider and two up riding, which gives you the, you know, the adjustability, which is what people want on their
you know, on
bagger.
the very first page of the owner's manual, it says, "Do not open this book." And they go, "Oh, okay."
So I'm gonna keep us moving in the next direction because I have a couple questions about them. We talked about, you know, you build a big motor. There's other things you need to do, and we talked about the compensator and the primary tensioner and a little bit about clutches and clutch baskets. But there's a component in between there and the wheel, which is the transmission. And I have some questions about the grudge boxes and you know what you can do, and you know, is a grudge box worth it? Is it something that you need? You know, so many people, you know, I think are riding around, and if they haven't broken anything, maybe they're worried they're going to, you know, and they're not giving it as much hell as they want to.
It kind of depends on how you're riding the bike mostly, and being honest with yourself about how you're going to ride the bike. Like we talked about, like, oh, I just cruise, right?
Yeah.
Whap, boom, exploded it, done. It happens. I mean, we have guys
Carrie,
that come
Carrie
in and go.
Estes is broke too.
Yeah, two, and that's a 114 cubic inch bike.
Yeah.
One of our 114s, really nasty setup. How did that do that? Did you kick it or something?
Blames me. Blames me
So-
instantly. Instantly. What did you do? What was
Hey.
I doing?
RHIP.
What are we talking about?
Transmissions. You know, there's a couple different ways to do it. You could put a grudge box in it, yes. We also have a service that we offer that allows us to go back through and anneal a gear set and do some work on where the shift components come together so that they interlock and help hold the gear in place, as opposed to a flat meshing of the surfaces that, you know, face the gears together. So there are some advantages there. It's a little bit cheaper than buying a grudge box, but I mean, a grudge box is a nice piece. I'm not gonna lie.
How much is the grudge box?
$3,500.
3,500. So our option that we have with our transmission service is about half that. So it depends on the budget. The grudge box has some very good benefits, but when we give someone what it takes to install it, how much it is, it's a big investment. It's a big investment into the bike. We have one that holds up great, pretty much tackles everything unless you're a stunt rider or your name is Mayhem. Okay,
You know
and
who
it
you
does
are.
some really good stuff, and it allows it to go in gear better, smoother. Your shifts are going to be quicker. They anneal the second and third gear, so they're a little softer, so you're not ripping and stripping off those teeth. And Grudge Box is also seeing a lot more horsepower come out of these M8s. They're building them bigger and more horsepower of them. So I believe Baker's actually attacking, hey, let's make the Grudge Box better.
Yeah.
So from what I've heard going around is they're actually modifying stuff to make their transmission even more robust to handle more of these bigger builds they're seeing come out as well.
And there's also options with the grudge box on shift patterns and
Yeah,
things
which
like
I
that.
was
that
going
you
to talk
can't do
about. If you're a
otherwise.
drag racer and you know you don't want to have to skip through neutral to get to second gear, you can get a neutral first pattern, which is super cool. So you have neutral, click up into first, and everything else is up from that point. Can you get those in reverse pattern too, or
Yeah.
no? Can you?
You can get
That's
neutral
cool.
up and neutral down.
That's sweet.
Another thing to remember with a grudge box is you will need to recalibrate your speedometer and your gears, because your cruise control, your gear indicator, your speedometer, none of that will be accurate after you install one. So you will need to do that in conjunction with a comprehensive tuner like we talked about before that can go in and change all those parameters so that it'll all match. And we've had, I don't know, a dozen or so that have come in and said, well, yeah, none of my gear indicators work, but I have a grudge box. And we just go, well, we can just recalibrate it. Oh, the guys that put it in said there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. If you're going to do a grudge box, talk to your shop and see if they have the capabilities to make it so it's like the factory put it in.
Yeah.
Not you put it in and you lose all this other thing. Your speedometer's off, your gear indicator's off, neutral light's not working. Talk to your shop, make sure you have someone local who can do it. If you can't find anyone, we can do it. We might not be near you. We ship bikes all over the country. Or if you do plan a trip and you already have one, it's not working, stop on by, we'll fit you in. Just call us ahead of time, please. Please.
Then really quick, let's address one little thing in the transmission, like why are they doing it? Well, to the best of our knowledge, the issue is the hardness of the gear itself, right? So the metal doesn't have, it's very brittle. In other words, it doesn't have a whole lot of give to it. So when you introduce a bunch of shock load to that gear, it has very little willingness to want to bend or move in the slightest little bit, so they fracture. You start fracturing teeth, it sends it through everything else. If you don't just split the thing in half completely, it starts shaving off gears, the teeth on the gears, and then they go back through the rest of the transmission and end up grenading everything else. So part of the process that we have endeavored with is to change the metal to make it slightly softer. I'm not talking about like butter or anything, but metallurgically speaking, they're soft enough where the gear will just flex a little bit to help make it live.
And now
accept that shock load.
that third gear, if I'm not mistaken, is a part of that main shaft, which means it's the only gear that does not have anything in between the clutch and it. And I believe that's why we see the most trouble with the third gear, in that when the power is delivered, there is no cushion. It is straight through that main shaft into that gear, and the only thing to give at that point are the teeth at the end.
There's also
All
a gear
balls.
that slides on it, and it's real loose from the factory. Their tolerance is there. So when we do the transmission services, that gets shimmed tighter.
Yeah.
And the transmission typically doesn't break on the day you're beating it. It usually breaks several days later, a month later. You usually hurt it, and then it slowly gets worse and worse and worse until you have nothing. And then you notice it big time. It's never usually, I shift, boom, missed a shift, boom, it's gone.
No, you're
It's-
just messing around, and then you go to third gear, and it just winds out. And you're like, well, I don't have third gear anymore.
Yeah, I was just cruising.
Yeah.
Just going down the
At
road,
that
and I shifted
moment you
into
were,
third,
but the
and it was
15
gone.
previous wheelies that you did is what did it.
So we get so many questions here, and I try to sum a bunch of them up. A lot of people are curious as to how far can you go on a stock crank? What kind of
that?
power can you safely get out of a stock crank? How far can you go without getting into that bottom end and really doing something? Welding cranks and removing balancers and things like that. Like
Idling
how
on a
far?
parking lot, 1,000.
Well, here's something else to think about. When you do pistons that are for cams that are going to make over 150 horse or more, they're not going to be balanced to a stock flywheel. So you got to pull the flywheel to rebalance it to that rotating mass of the pistons anyway. So when you pull it out and you have to do that, it doesn't cost any more money. You're already 95% there for them to put the welds on the pin and pin it. When you start to get over 140, that's where we're really wanting to do that service. Because if something does happen, man, it costs so much money. It costs you the whole motor again. So.
And what's surrounding it? Do you have a competition transmission? Do you have a lockup clutch? Are you racing on a prep track? Are you dropping it into gear at 2,500 RPM at a drag strip?
If so, call us.
Yeah, those are things that are going to seriously impact whether or not, again, it's
You may
shock
be-
load, right? Like anything else. You're
You may
running the
be
motor
entitled compensation.
and you drop the clutch and that thing wants to stand up, that force goes somewhere. And it goes from the rear wheel to the transmission to the primary right up to that flywheel, and something's got to give. And if you don't have the components in there to deal with it, it's like back in the old days, you'd build a really badass small block, and it was a 2-bolt car, and you wanted to put a supercharger on it, and you did it for a little while, and the bottom end would come out of it. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, so the S&S kits, they're 124, they're 128. Revolution makes those kits. Those pistons are designed to go on that factory bottom end without having to rebalance it. If you do custom setups like we offer for the higher horsepower range, and we don't show them all over YouTube because we have everyone calling us and they think they're budget builds. They see 180, 190 horse, they think it costs the same as these other 128 kits. They're drastically different
Everything is done
setups.
in
So
those setups.
we can do them, but that's why you don't see us just pushing those all over the internet. We're busy on the phones. We take one call after another. We have that set up, but when we go to those custom pistons designed for that high-end stuff with your intake closes beyond like 37 degrees, you start to get to 38, 40, 44, 42, a 48, that needs a different piston for that corrected compression to get it up there for that cam to work. And those are usually a little bit heavier because we're going a bigger bore and we balance that whole flywheel. At that point, if you're doing that motor, you're getting the Pro Edge, we're windowing it, we're doing everything. And then you have an option to Temkin bearing it for your case. We bore the case out, we do all that at the same time. So once you break that threshold of going, hey, I want all of it, you're just doing all of it. So I'm kind of saying if you're doing an SS 124, 128 Cara Revolution, stock flywheel is good because it's not going to make the compression needed for those huge cams.
So, we get a lot of people out here asking about twin cams. how does the cost difference compare on a twin cam as opposed to Milwaukee 8? We do so many Milwaukee 8s. It's kind of easy to shoot what we're looking for.
Like
but
to achieve equal power.
well, yeah, that and to do reasonable stuff as well. Obviously, I think to get the same power, you're going to spend a lot more.
You're going to have to put money in the heads on a twin cam.
Yeah. So, how does it? Because we push so many people, I guess, in the end that are looking for those big numbers. You spend a lot of money on a twin cam to get there, and if I had a twin cam 103 or even a 110, what am I looking at putting into that motor to get power out of it? Especially if I'm riding around with my buddies on their Milwaukee 8s. What do I got to do to my twin cam to keep up with them, or maybe even just ride with them and not feel like I'm getting walked all over?
Well, the hard part is, again, it's relative. Those questions are hard to answer because, you could say that for $3,500 I can get you more power, but if you have a 103 and you want to make 130 foot-pounds of torque and 130 horsepower, you're not going to be spending $3,500 to get it.
Yeah.
You're going to be putting the $7,000 to $10,000 because you're going to need to do heads, you're going to need to do exhaust, you're going to need to do a pretty extensive build on a twin cam to get the same results that you're going to get out of a Milwaukee 8. And it's typically going to be a little bit more expensive because they spend a lot of R&D money on making these engines more efficient than the twin cams. So dollar for dollar, they start out with more power. So if they start out with more power, every dollar you spend is going to gain more power. 114 twin cam is pretty hard to get. And that's a stock bike. We have them all over the place.
There's
a Milwaukee 8.
There's a couple stages there. I think to get an M8 to 110 horsepower, 100 horsepower is real easy.
Oh, yeah.
To get a twin cam to 110, 100, it takes a lot more. Now, if we're building a 150 horsepower motor for either one, now they're more equivalent in price.
Right.
Because
we
we're
get into
building.
the issues in the bottom end too. I mean, I would not trust a twin cam bottom end at anywhere near the levels of power that we see in the M8. I think they were just built different, right?
Right, and
The way that they were pressed, or I don't know what it was, but I hear a lot more about bottom end twin cam stuff issues than you have ever heard in an M8 bottom end problems.
yeah,
You
so
think, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely.
Forums.
You think so?
Well, it's the way the
I welded
compensator's
mine.
held onto that flywheel.
Mine is welded.
We haven't seen an issue of a flywheel scissoring on an M8.
Right.
Okay. We don't see a ton of those either on twin cams, but we have seen them. It's not like
Well,
everyone has it happen.
When they first went to the pressed together flywheels, they had some issues, but they fixed that. Just like everything else when they do it in the beginning, and then as soon as they come out with something new, we see if we can destroy it, and we're successful. Because that's what we do.
That's what we do.
So a lot of the questions seem to center around guys that do a lot of touring, actually take their bikes out and tour. But, when they're back at home and they're going to bike night and they're screwing around with their friends, they want to lay some power down and drag with them. So I think a lot of people are concerned maybe about the reliability and what we've seen out of the reliability of these 124, 128 kits. I think that, there's quite a bit to talk about there, mainly in the fact that the reason we use them so much is the reliability that we've seen out of them. It's why we're not building 150s and trying to just push the envelope that much further. Most of our customers are that customer that tours their bikes and wants to beat their buddies when their buddies are running their mouth.
I think Harold Walker has put 35,000 miles on his 128 this year.
Yep. And everybody on the south side of Chicago is afraid of that bike. No one
And
wants,
most
no
of the
one wants
people
a
in
piece of it,
California,
man.
because about once a month or once every 6 weeks, he rides it to California, spanks the shit out of a bunch of people, and then rides it back and calls us.
With like story after story after story. And then he calls me up last week, a couple weeks ago, whatever. He's like, man, I can't even get a race anymore. I can't.
And now
They're all afraid.
he has an ultra limited, water cooled M8.
Yeah. And now he says he wants to build a real bad one.
Yeah.
Well, you can get one of the 135 kits.
And he's got the Dark Horse comp, I believe.
Yeah.
We did all that in there, and I rode that bike, and I believe that was one of the early dark horses we did. And I came to Jamie afterwards, and I was like, "That's the setup." You know,
With a big
Yeah.
bore D&D.
yeah, that's the setup.
Really nice setup.
It rode really good, and it rode really good in the parking lot, and that was where I judged it. You know, when you're out getting on it, they're all going to get on it pretty well. But
You did leave the parking lot though, right?
I did. I
Okay.
did leave the parking lot. But
And that's one of the beauties too. It's hard to describe until you've ridden both.
Seeing ride's really good. I'm coming back.
You know, a 130 horsepower twin cam is going to feel a bit like a race bike. It just is. They are going to kind of buck and do some weird things at you at low RPM. These M8s, man, they'll ride around the parking lot like a stock bike practically, and then they'll lay down 130, 140 horse and 140, 150 foot-pounds of torque, like effortless. You know, you can cruise them, you can put your wife on, cruise around, listen to your stereo, and then when you want to unleash it, you can unleash it and rip.
Post Malone, what'd that thing make? What,
152, 156.
did I hear
Oh,
that right?
speak into the
152,
mic.
156. Yeah. Why don't you come over here, Jordan?
Post
Let's
Malone!
hear that from the horse's mouth.
Pre-tattooed post.
152 horse and 156 horse.
And you got a little bit to do
torque.
tomorrow.
Torque has
You
some
still got a little
Two
bit to go
horses.
tomorrow.
Had like 4 beers.
More
on it.
horsepower. Horsepower and horsepower.
Before you went in the dyno? No. So yeah, that's and what kind of setup do we have on that bike? That's a
That's a Harley.
That's one of our 131s.
131, 152,
Stroker.
156. He's almost finished with it. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
cam is it?
Now-
That's impressive.
Well, those things are just torque monsters that, we can get a little bit more gear under there for higher end, more
Yeah.
mile an hour, and not really sacrifice just leaving the line on those things. They're beast. on those
Jordan, what did it
stroker
make it
kits.
2,000?
Yeah, print it off.
Turn it
Let me
off.
look at it.
I'd love to see it.
So we get this call all the time, and I have
Fire.
it kind of twofold, which is the twin cam and the M8, and it's the exact same position, which is I bought a Harley Stage 3, and I want to do more. Where do I go from here? I've got the big bore kit. I got a couple of guys running the Stage 3, Stage 4 twin cams and M8s, and they're just not happy with what they got. And the answer is fairly similar on both, I think. But what would you do? You bought a Harley kit. You're not happy with it. Your buddy bought a Moonshine motor, and you realize you want to do something
Call us
else.
and we'll fix it.
615
Yep.
771 7775.
And you have to
Ask for
understand,
Aaron.
I think
And call them once a day, every day, for 30
calling
days.
it every day. You have to understand what you bought, what you paid for. You paid for on that setup the displacement. Yes, you got a cam, you got the ancillary parts that it takes to put it together. That's cool. You also have a warranty-friendly package there, right? So it's a bit of a series of stacked compromises in a build like that. And I'm saying that on two fronts. What I mean by that is it's warranty safe, awesome, good for you, but it's also a setup that's been designed and it's been designed by committee, by people who are trying to keep the guy that wants to sound a certain way happy, by guy that wants to control, EPA has a hand in it.
EPA is the biggest,
Yeah,
the biggest
like what are
thing.
the emissions going to be on this setup? So their hands are really tied behind their back, where we design a build and it's got one purpose, and that's to either make maximum horsepower, maximum torque, or a nice mid-range setup for where you want the power delivered. And there's nothing wrong, except for maybe some issues that we can't really quantify just yet on a long term of what some of the issues might be with the cylinder and piston setups. But we build them with no compromise. And yeah, we can fix it. We can change the cam. We'll definitely change the tuner. And just those couple of things right there with maybe a small induction change and an injector change will completely change the characteristics of that bike.
Well, the one that we did today, the 15 Limited, he had a Harley tire shredder that had my least favorite cam in the world, the 259E. And we took out that cam, took off the Screaming Eagle exhaust system, put the Wood 999-6, and put the D&D, and it went from 100 and, now this is a 110 Harley straight from a dealership with their best stuff on it. When we got it, it had 113 foot-pounds of torque and 100 horsepower, and we did those minor changes, tuned it, had 125 foot-pounds of torque and 123 horsepower. Done.
Completely different machine riding it.
Yep.
Completely different.
And at 2,700 RPMs, it was 26 pounds of torque better after we were done, that is such a noticeable difference, because that's right where you ride. 27 to 3,000, it's like having like a brand new motorcycle. Now, the setup that he bought wasn't necessarily bad, other than that cam sucks, but you know, he didn't go all out, and we still were able to make a lot of improvements. A lot of times what'll happen is we'll get that set up, and we'll take the heads off and we'll redo the heads, because everything that Harley does, you have to remember they're an automotive manufacturer. So everything they do has to meet the scruples of Big Brother. There's no way they can get around it, and they can't make things that aren't agreed by the EPA.
And therein lies the compromise.
Plus, if you've had one of those kits, and let's say you've had it for 2 years, your lifters are getting tired. There's some pieces that if we take them out, we're just freshening up as well.
Yeah.
So you get some benefits besides, I paid twice. Hey, you have 10,000 miles on a lifter, we throw them out, put new ones in. I mean, that lifter life starts over, and that's something you want to start over. If you're going to replace something inside the motor, replace those lifters. I mean, those things go through a lot of stress. They get beat up a lot. So it's not the end of the world. Now, if the bike's brand new, if we build it, we're a little different than other shops out there. If we build it, we're going to warranty the motor for the first 2 years. So you just bought the bike from someone's showroom floor and you brought it to us, we're going to warranty our build if we do it and tune it, as long as you maintain it at a Harley dealer per the service manual until your factory warranty's out. That's something we do because we're confident in the parts we put in them. And back to the pricing of, hey, why do they cost this? What's this? And we don't sacrifice that. One, we don't sacrifice it because we don't want to pay for it. Two, we don't want you to be stranded on the road dealing with a problem in the middle of a trip you've planned for 1.5 years with your buddies. You know, so that's something we do.
So we talked a little bit, kind of danced all around the subject that I got a few questions on, which is at what point do I need to go from a belt to a chain? You know, we talked about transmission and wheels and tires, but, you know, at what point does a chain become necessary, and what are the downsides? Because there are some downsides to a chain as well.
That's pretty easy to answer. If you shred your belt, a chain is necessary. Until that point, it's not. Cut.
And I believe you were talking about Harold Walker. Is he on a chain or is he
No,
on a belt?
he's on a belt.
He's on a belt, right?
Nope.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
But you know, if you dump the clutch and do burnouts all the time and try to wheelie it, you're going to eat your belt and you're going to need to go to a chain. The downside to a chain is it is a lot more maintenance. The maintenance intervals are shortened considerably, and when you do need to replace it, which you're going to have to do periodically, you know, it's a couple $100 a pop.
And they do
A
take
belt
a little
has
bit of power.
a belt has no replacement interval. When it's gone, you replace it.
So it really, you wouldn't recommend going to a chain until you're really there. You know, doing a chain when it's not necessary can be a lot more problematic than.
Well, it depends on how cool you want to be. Because being cool ain't cheap.
Well, there's a couple things. There's a budget. Chain's not cheap to put on a bike. But there's stuff you can do if you don't do a chain where you're worried about it. You know, it usually doesn't rip off all the teeth all at once. Usually it'll chunk some, rip a couple off. If you get under
That's
your
fine.
bike, huh?
And that's fine.
And you start running your hand over your belt and checking it, and there's no problems, it's pristine, you're good to go.
Yeah, right.
You get under there and start looking at your belt and shit's missing. You know, there's chunks missing out of it, hanging off of it, teeth kind of ripped up. You're getting close. You get under there one day and 30% of your teeth are missing here and there. You might not want to ride it that
My
day.
bike is surgical.
But the belts usually, like we talked about the transmission, it didn't typically go all at once. It went a little bit, and finally it just gave up completely.
Unless you're mayhem.
Same thing with the belts. Well, I mean, his went at 1 o'clock, and then it went at 1:10, and then 1:20. By 3 o'clock it was done.
No, I think he like wrote it, and then he left here about a half hour later, blew it up, and then was like,
I
What
think
now?
I just got this thing today.
I think he picked it up and he's like, I'm gonna beat on this to be the guy that breaks this belt the quickest.
Well, you know, he went to Florida. Were you here when he came back? And he was like, "Man, I've been trying to break it and I can't."
I was there.
After we did all that stuff, he's like, "I'm trying to break it and I can't break it." And we're like, "Why are you trying to break it?"
He starts laughing. He thinks it's awesome.
He's crazy. But yeah, you know, those parts like a transmission and a chain, if it's something that you want to do or that you think you're going to ride aggressively enough that you're going to end up being there anyway, then do it. If not, you know, there is no pattern. There is no, this is the magic formula when the belt breaks. This is what you do to break a transmission, because I've seen stock bikes come in here. How many, 10 bikes that have had just stock 107s that have blown third gear up. So
Stage 2s, Stage 3s,
yeah,
Stage 4s, Stage
it's
1s.
those questions are super hard to answer, and if you think that it's going to happen and it's in your budget, then let's take care of it. But if it's not necessarily in your budget and it hasn't broke yet, then if it's not broke, you don't really need to fix it.
More maintenance on the chain.
Yeah.
You
More
got to
maintenance.
clean it.
A little louder, more maintenance.
You have to adjust them periodically.
They have
'cause
to be
will
adjusted
stretch.
very often, and they make a lot of noise if you don't.
Yeah, and
You're
they,
gonna-
and they will take a little bit of power. So if you're going to put a chain on, you know, it's difficult to quantify because every setup's a little bit different, but a chain is going to take a little bit of horsepower away. But if if a gear change is, not necessary, but you want to, or it's necessary, you can change, ratio in the rear end pretty easily, going up or down with sprockets to
it looks
affect the
good.
gear change for more top end or more bottom end.
Did this thing have a chain on it?
Yeah.
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 A lot of guys doing these big builds are putting chains on. They just don't want to be, you don't want to ride from your house to Sturgis, be messing around with your buddies, be on the side of the road. I think that's where some of these guys are just like, I don't want to worry about it.
So I got another question, and this brings us into another section. And a guy said, I got a 2020 Road Glide, and I'd like to upgrade the brakes. I come from the sport bike world, and I'm used to a more aggressive brake. What are my options? It's not talked about a lot. It's not easy to find that information. What are the options for brakes?
Well, there's steps you can do. You can start with a more aggressive pad on them, but it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for the feel of a touchier lever, we change the calipers. But on the bigger bikes is where we see more problems when we get into these brakes of guys pushing them, right?
And do your math. Like, call Mike, call us. But just changing a caliper is going to introduce some problems that you maybe didn't consider, and that's in the difference in the volume between the master and the slave. And you can put yourself into a bad situation.
I don't think you
where-
can say that anymore.
What's that?
Well, we have a lot of kits
Or
where we're
the
going
master and the caliper. Sorry.
Sorry.
from an axial to a radial mount brake setup, and
He's a heathen.
when we do the radial mounted brakes, it's a big difference. The calipers are a lot stronger. They're a stiffer caliper. They
And-
feel, you can feel it in the lever that there's no flex in. That's a big difference.
Change
and
your
then when
lines. I mean, you can get rid of quite a bit of flex in the lines too, with
Yeah.
a nice braided line.
you can.
And we have mounts that can convert the standard axial setup to a radial setup brake. So it's not something that you have to spend all your budget on either.
And when you're on a heavy bike, like a touring bike, there's rotors we see that we like a lot, and there's rotors we see that aren't set up for that much weight. So if it's not a shop doing performance brakes every day, let us know. We can get set up. We can ship the stuff to you. You can ship your bike to us, bring us your bike, however you want it. But we try to get everything set up, so we ship you a box. You have it all. You're not running somewhere to find the pieces to make it work, and
You
that's
have-
what we specialize
Hey,
in.
look, there's some rotors right
Nah,
there.
we'll leave them.
Don't reuse your rotor hardware either.
Area 51.
Please don't. Be safe.
So many of the questions I think
Show
people
that
maybe
one.
have were not here earlier in the broadcast, but so many of the questions are the same thing over and over again. And what do I do? I bought this or I bought that, and every answer I think is unique, and that's kind of why we did this a little bit to touch on some of it, but it's ultimately I think why we say call us,
Yeah.
because what we can do one-on-one is a lot more. You guys, Aaron especially, deals with this every day, and every customer you talk to has a little bit different of a setup.
And we're busy trying to get back to customers that have left us deposits, have bikes in the shop trying to figure out where they are and everything. It's hard for us to spend that quality time on the phone with you guys to answer your questions if it's not helping us or getting a job moved through the shop. So this kind of helps you guys answer those questions or get your questions answered by doing this while we're not trying to take care of someone or got 2 guys on hold or trying to figure something out for a customer. Appreciate the questions.
So there are a bunch of people watching and typing questions right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I think we should.
Hey guys,
Should we do this?
I'm gonna touch on this
thank you.
again because I think this is probably the most asked question, and so many people go online. I think, I just bought a 107.
Polo.
What should I run? A 472 or a 475?
I'd say that one more time.
I said I have a stock 107. I just bought it. What should I run? A 475 or a
Don't
ever go
472?
Neither.
Yeah.
Neither.
It's so many times we get those
Neither.
questions. If you were
If
listening,
you have a stock 107, I would recommend a
465.
465.
Fueling or an SNS.
Yeah. If you want mid-range and top end, go with the fueling. If you want brute torque down low, do an SNS 465. It's awesome.
well, that cam sounds better than the rest of them. Those 2 SNS cams they have,
Yeah.
their 475 for something with high compression pistons sounds awesome, and then their 465 has a really cool little lopey idle for an M8 that we like. Let's get some good questions.
Don't be
So-
that guy with a stock compression bike and a 475.
I have a guy on here. He's got a 124 520 cam, ported heads, pretty big motor. I'm not sure in the answer as to why, but he said he has to run a short pipe. What short
Probably
pipe
he's got
would you
a
recommend?
14-inch shock on it or something like that.
I would not run a short pipe.
We can get this shorter.
I was about to say
Shorter. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
If you want a pipe that dumps in front of your saddlebag, sorry.
On what kind of bike is it?
if he's still on, what kind of bike? Tell him, let us know what bike and what he's trying to do. We'll help guide him.
If it's a
And-
bagger, maybe a D&D Bobcat could be okay.
Okay, I got another question that's really good. Tires.
Ooh.
They're
What-
important.
Yes, and they are round.
Yes.
What do you recommend for tires? And there's one that we do recommend a lot.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Aaron.
All right. I'm running a Bridgestone H50.
I'm running Bridgestone H50s on all my bikes.
Yep. Except for one
He's
bike that
not.
I have that has
I have
to
different
have white
tires
walls
on
it.
every bike.
I'm running an Avon on that. But that's
They just
because
put them
I
on
have
my
to have
bike
white
and they're like, try it.
Yeah.
Try it. Can you crash this?
But
I have those on one.
We've recommended those tires to people, and they have come back after a test ride, and it's a different bike.
The Bridgestone.
The H50.
Absolutely, I run them on my
Bridgestone.
bike as well.
Yep.
They and I can speak firsthand that they dive into corners a little more. They're a more aggressive tire. If you are not the kind of person that likes to try to scrape when you get into a turn, it may be a little aggressive for you.
They do. They definitely feel
They tip in.
different when you go into a corner.
Yes.
Well, those are what we run on the baggers. If you're running like a lowrider S, they don't make that front tire size.
Well, they don't make a 110, but they do make a 100.
Yeah.
So-
So on that setup, you could run a Night Dragon, which is going to wear out faster if you're pushing the limits, because it is a narrower front tire, and they are working on coming out with that 110
Yeah.
size for you Dyna guys.
Yeah.
So
they
I got
will
an
be
answer.
Probably early next year.
To why he has to run a short pipe, and I think we have the answer that he wants into why he should not. His swing arm will not allow.
He has a Brock swing.
Brock's.
Yeah, we've been there, haven't we?
Yep. Yeah, we were just there on a
We modified the
incredible
pipes.
journey. Yeah.
We modified pipes to fit Brock swing arms.
Bring us your bike.
Yep.
This bike
We're-
actually right behind mine has
Yeah.
a
That has a Brock
modified.
swing arm
And
with a
it
modified
is
pipe.
not hitting it with a hammer.
Yeah.
What?
No, it was professionally and meticulously
Correct.
modified.
Meticulously, professionally, and it was polished.
Well, we can do two things. We can modify the muffler to clear it. It's not the cheapest option, but it's super slick. One-off custom. You have to tune it after it's done. We can get this exhaust pipe made that way. Let us know what swing arm it is, because some swing arms are wider, some are narrower. You can also swap out that swing arm, which probably is something you don't want to do since you already have it on the bike, to something narrower, like a track dynamic swing arm, but you got to have them modify them
Yeah.
when they build. They build them special to us because we've run into that where we have them make them narrower.
Yeah.
And then we can get our Moonshine anti-reversion 2-in-1 into a short pipe. So you have the anti-reversions up front, and you can get a dog ball muffler for it as well. So that's a one-off custom pipe. There's some lead time on it, but we can get that for you as well. So
Yeah,
multiple options.
We've run into that more than
Yeah,
once.
he says he's got a 2018 Road King with a Drago kit. I'm not sure.
Drago.
I'm not
Drago?
familiar
Yeah.
with that one.
That's a super good stuff.
And he says he's got a 62 millimeter throttle body and
I'll-
a pretty big build. So
Yeah, maybe tomorrow. Call me.
Yeah,
that's
it
where he
sounds like it's
limits.
a
But I
ripper.
believe the same workaround applies.
Yeah.
We could have a custom muffler made to
Well, and there are some manufacturers that have more tolerance than others as far as the way they come out, but
Yeah.
most of it is we modify the parts to fit. Because
Yeah,
I don't, even if you have that kind of a swing arm, there's, you've put all this money in it, and it would just suck to.
Yeah, he said it's not a Brox, it's a custom, but regardless, we've
Same.
They
We've
all,
dealt-
it's
yeah.
the
with
axle
this.
shafts, the
yeah.
axle adjustments.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
That's an interesting one because I didn't expect that to come up.
Usually it's because they have super long stretch bags and they want the dump to go in front of it because they saw it on a bike show somewhere.
So I had somebody here that asked about E85. What do you
Whoa.
think about E85?
5.
Oh,
Yep.
that's a beast all on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a big conversation, tuning-wise.
well, it's going to make power, it's going to run clean, but you're stuck with it on the bike because we don't have a sensor that can sense, flex fuel. We don't have a flex
Right.
fuel sensor on a bike. So once you're on it, you've
You're
designed
on it,
your system
yeah.
to run it. And your injector, I'm just going to throw out random numbers, is double the size of what you're going to run in gas.
That
Your
seems
mileage goes,
specific.
your mileage, it's about double.
Roundabout.
So your mileage is going to be sacrificed with that. But the benefits are it's going to burn clean. It's going to
Cool.
run cooler. There are benefits. It does
Now, does
tear
the
up the
exhaust
fuel
smell like
system.
corn? Does it smell like popcorn?
It does. It does.
Nom, nom,
My big
nom.
nose, I can smell it. But super cool setup. But the fuel systems in the car world, they have fuel pumps made for it. They have other components designed for it in the fuel system. In the bike world, I haven't seen a fuel pump that's like E85 fuel pump.
I haven't either.
So we're using the gasoline fuel pump, and there's stuff in there that will wear out faster, throwing that in the system. But it's not like you have to climb under the car and drop a tank and do a line. It's easy to get to. It just might not have the longevity
I don't
you're
know if
looking
some
for.
of the fuel line or the regulator or any of the stuff even has enough volume to deal with that on the big end
It can.
of some of that stuff.
Yeah. They're running them on them. We can get it done and dialed in, but you're sacrificing a lot of stuff there. It's really cool for race bike. And then
Yeah. It
E85,
becomes-
if you let it sit, it's going to gel up.
Yeah, it
Something
becomes
else, that's
real
not something you're storing.
purpose-built.
You guys keep laughing.
I got one that did.
Oh.
I have to ask it just because. But what do you think of car tires on motorcycles?
What?
Have you
Can-
seen this?
Can
It's
we
a
get
gold
a, can
one.
we get a real question?
Going. It's designed for a car.
Yeah.
I think on Boss Hosses they are pretty badass.
Yeah.
I almost bought one at auction. I wanted to see
God.
what you'd say when it came in.
Oh,
With
it
a
is-
502 big block, and I was like, I'm buying this. And then
hell.
went for like 16 grand. I was like, no way in hell I'm buying that thing.
They're actually a lot
I
easier
would
to
have said
ride
they
than you
unloaded
would
the
think.
wrong bike.
I was gonna buy it just so Mike had to deal with it. Hey, Mike.
That's like a car motor and a power glide stuffed into a
Yeah.
bike.
It
Right?
was a
They're a trip.
502.
They're a trip, man.
That's crazy.
I don't know if I'm flexible enough to sit on it. Gotta be able to do a
Yeah.
split.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Why?
take
They
gymnastics
try to
for a
flip
week.
over when you rev them up. Just in so much torque.
They are cool. It's America. Only in America.
Yeah.
America.
What about sporties?
Love
I got a
sports.
question about sporties. You know?
Whoa, what's the question?
We don't talk. We don't do
No
very
car
much
tires
stuff
on
about
Sportsters.
sporties.
I know, and what's funny is we all have them.
I was just about to say what most people don't know is all of us have
Every one
Sportsters.
of us rides a Sportster. Well, no, we definitely need to put out some more on Sportsters, and we've been talking about doing that. Like, there's
Shane's
Shane's
got
right
a
there.
badass
There's,
Sportster right there.
there's one he just got back together.
Fresh motor in that one.
Mine's been apart for 2 years.
But no,
Yeah.
badass bikes, man.
Yeah,
Seriously.
and there's a lot of options out there for those as well.
Mm-hmm.
They've been making that motor for a long time, and again, that's a what do you want? What are you looking for?
Yeah.
There's so many different ways you can go with a Sportster.
And like grenade proof.
Yeah,
Like they're just stout.
Yeah, they're tough little
machines,
bikes,
man.
man.
They're tough as nails.
that's why we all have one.
Yeah,
Well, how cool is
Yeah,
it?
Roy rides around everywhere,
What year did they
bouncing
come
off
out
the
with
rev
that
limiter everywhere he goes.
57.
That motor?
Well, the current version is like
80
no, it was 1957 was when they went to that platform. They've improved the heads and stuff over the years, but
No, that bottom case.
You check the
How
web
long
channel,
we had that
Mike's got a
bottom case
really
going?
badass set of heads
That
for his
exact
bike.
bottom
I think
case.
it's the one you have to wear
07?
glasses to look at.
07.
that's when they 07's when they put the transmission inside the compartment, so it didn't have a cassette.
You
Other
have
than
to
that,
wear, do you have to wear glasses to look at the heads for your Sportster?
they're pretty shiny. I like shiny things. It doesn't take much for me.
Big
It's
valves,
shiny and
dual
loud.
plug. It's a nice
We
setup.
keep going. We still got a bunch of watchers on there. Questions?
Not as many questions.
If we have questions, we'll go. If the questions stop, we'll stop.
Everyone wants us to do it again, though.
We'll do
Oh,
it
yeah.
again.
Yeah,
Do it
we'll
again.
do it again.
Like
Yeah,
we
it's
said,
fun.
it's hard while we're trying to conduct business and just keep everything rolling. We're all busy, so monthly.
Yeah, we
We
should
will.
start it once a month. We can get on here. I think.
That would be super cool.
What about nitrous? Customers
like to
asking
try
about
it.
building a nitrous M8.
Well, what's he trying to do? Is he still on there? Why? Is he taking the racetrack Friday night, or does he just want nitrous for more horsepower? Are you racing and just want to eat someone up on a Friday night?
Well, I think most of the time you got nitrous. That's just to make sure your buddy cannot pass you when he
Yeah,
tries.
and then depending on how much you're going to
Well,
use,
they can't until that one time.
I would want to make sure it's set up
Something
for it.
fails.
Yeah.
Solenoid, boop.
Yeah.
You forgot to turn your bottle
We
off.
have not done nitrous. I've been asked about it, but no, we don't have a setup for it yet. But if you're going to run nitrous, I'd want to make sure that the engine is set up for it. So like the ring gaps and all that are set to run a heavy amount of nitrous. Probably going to want to have some way to ensure that we've got supplemental fuel and that it's operating properly if we're going to run it. And it's going to need a tune for it, and that's the most difficult thing is if you're going to switch between running with and without. We don't have an ECM in this bike that allows us to go from one timing map to another timing map to work on nitrous. So
Well,
when
that's
you're going
when
to
you
arm
want to
it,
go to something like a Thundermax that's kind of set up for it.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
Thundermax
Exactly right.
builds ECMs that are designed for turbos and nitrous
right.
applications, and
So you got to stack a lot of things in it in that setup to make sure that you're really built for it. If you don't want to just go out and have fun and grenade it one night or one day,
Or
but
we-
it will.
Or we can build you a 147. Just it's there all the time.
I've had a few
Cool.
questions about something, and a few about what it is, and are we still seeing it? Is it that common? And I think this is a question. It's kind of an older question because we have not seen, I don't think, as much of it in a while.
no, and even when it was a pretty loud talked about subject, it really actually was never that common. It was a lot more common in 2017 than it is now, but
The
We-
2020 oil pump from Harley is a beast.
yeah,
It's a beast out of the box. They've solved the problem. They've overkilled it now. So
it's next to the second best pump.
Well, the guy with
Right.
the custom swing arm and all that said he'll give you a call tomorrow, Aaron. So
Perfect. What's his name?
Yeah, we'll get him we'll get him figured out.
okay, so inverted front ends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Badass stuff.
Why? Why? When? Why? Why do I need an inverted front end?
I think to answer that the best, he should probably go back and watch
The
the
Sasha
episode we had
Kraus
with
video.
Sasha Kraus, because we spend about an hour going over inverted front ends with Sasha. But it changes the ergonomics of the bike, improves the handling significantly, and on that video, we go into pretty in depth on how all that works.
Weight distribution.
I would
JB.
just set it up to why would you buy a regular Corvette and why would you need the Z06? Do you need the Z06 on the street? No. Is it going to do the stuff that you want to do when you want to do it? Yeah. Can you take the Z06 to a track day and rip? Yes. So if you have an inverted front end and you're okay spending the money with the brakes, because not only are you getting the front end suspension, you're also getting the brakes that come with it.
Right.
And that's a huge factor. I like the brakes just as much as the suspension part on it. And if you're going to be going to the twisties, you're going to be taking it to some really cool roads and hit the mountains and stuff by you, and you're getting switchbacks and you're hitting corners, absolutely. If
And-
you're in Florida and you're just riding flat roads all the time, and you're not really turning real hard and stuff, why? But if you're pushing the bike, having fun with it, now let's invest the money. Let's get this thing to handle like a bike it's not supposed to. Let's make the Harley perform more like a Ducati, a Yamaha out of the box. Now the bike is something cool. It's like the diesel truck. The diesel trucks weren't supposed to be fast, but when you pull up next to a Mustang and you dust him in your Dodge, your Ford, your Chevy,
It's fun.
it's like awesome. You know,
Yeah.
it's not supposed to just hit you up. There's your Mustang, there's your Camaro, there's your Corvette. I'm in a diesel truck and I can pull a tractor tomorrow. That's what it's like when you get the Harley to turn like that with inverted fork and suspension and brake setup.
all the chicks.
All of them.
So I got a decent
all-
question here, which
it's a
is,
chick.
and I think this goes
Might be.
into
Shoots all the dudes.
the way we do things, which
Like Miss Tracy.
they're asking, is a 117 cylinder, does it have a thicker cylinder wall than taking a 114 and boring it to a 117?
One more time.
Well, a 114 and a 117 are the same cylinder.
4.075.
Well,
Yeah.
it depends.
But yes,
If you were to take
if
your
you
114
if you were to buy a cylinder that's already set up as a 114 or a 117 versus taking a 107 cylinder and boring it to a 114, then yes, it is a much thicker cylinder wall. And I don't even recommend boring the stock cylinders, because on the stock cylinders they don't actually touch the outside of the spigots don't touch the case bore. So when you bore that out and it makes the skirt thin, it cracks right underneath the skirt. And if you in the very beginning, everybody was boring them out and it was groovy, and we noticed immediately how much warpage there is inside the stock cylinders, so we never went that route. Nobody bores them anymore. If you go to any performance shop, they don't do it. I don't recommend
Well,
it.
and what people may not know is that those cylinders are not against the cases.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
You know,
I was gonna say.
there's an air gap there. So when they
Yeah.
build bigger cylinders, they are available, more space available to make those walls
Right.
thicker.
Even if they're not braking, they're just not holding round through the
Yeah.
whole bore.
So
So,
you-
you're getting some blow by. So
Yeah.
if you have a setup like
Scuffing
that,
and
it
all
made
that.
horsepower the day it was built. Put it on dyno 10,000 miles later. Let's see what it looks like. Most of the time, there's a little bit of loss there because it's just not sealing up.
You know, I got questions. I think a lot of the questions are really, we've done videos on these things and talked about them. You know, people asking about, what's the difference between the fueling and the SNS plate? You know, which one's better? We run them both.
We run them both.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to us, it's kind of, are we installing it or someone else installing it? You know, too, on some of that stuff that we do. What color do you like? What cam you running?
Yeah.
You run a fueling cam, put the fueling plate in there. Run an
Right.
SNS cam, put the SNS plate in there. You like the look of the blue? Cool. We haven't had issues at either one of them.
Yeah.
But,
And they both sell kits where you can get a little bit of a discount if you buy the entire kit versus piecing everything out. So if you really like the fueling, 472 cam, you can get the kit that has the pump, the plate, the cam, push rods, all of it from fueling,
ARP
lifters,
bolts.
And
ARP bolts, and it's a good deal.
especially if you're building it at home, there is something to be said for sticking with the same manufacturer on as many parts as possible.
Yeah.
We were engineered to work together, yeah.
2 more.
2 more?
Make them count.
You know, I like the questions that we get a lot that are coming in. I want to do a little bit more. I have some work done to it, but I don't want to do bigger cylinders. Is there a lot that can be done? You know, I don't want to go bigger displacement, but I already have a Harley cam or something like that. I mean, are there a lot of options without going with bigger cylinders? I mean,
Well, if you say you have a 114 and you have a Harley torque cam in it, absolutely. There's a lot you can do with just changing the cam. You don't necessarily need to go all out. Look, Jay Brown, for example. You know, with Jay Brown, he bought a 114, and we did, I think, a
Fueling 465.
465 cam in it. He has no intention of ever being big bore because he said, "Man, I've got 130 foot-pounds of torque. That's all I
it's
ever need."
changing now. He's going to do a 128.
Oh, is he now? After,
He
but
is.
you know,
We've already talked about it.
just pairing the right exhaust taking care of some of the things in the primary. There's a lot of stuff you can do, and a little bit of power gain. There's a lot of things you can do to improve the rideability of the bike.
But
And
going back to foundation, and that's a prime example right there. Jay and I spoke about it, and he said, I'm going to go 128. I want to get some things done. What could I do? And I said, well, let's set a real good foundation. Let's get the primary taken care of. So that's done. Now we do the top end of the motor and do everything else, and you've got everything down here that will support the kind of power that we're going to make. And so he's got it. He's using it now, loves the way the clutch feels, hooks up, likes the rideability better, dropped 4 pounds off the flywheel. So now when we go on to make that next move for him, we haven't spent money that we're going to end up throwing away. He's already got a great pipe for it. He built his bike on a D&D, 2-in-1, which will work perfect on his 128 as long as we stick on factory heads, which is what he wants to do. If we had gone with a big ported head and a big throttle body, we might want to make a different exhaust choice. But we kind of laid that we understood the direction that we were going in the beginning, so no parts had to hit the floor.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is going to change the feel of your bike. This guy is going to change the feel of your bike. The clutch is going to change the feel of how it takes off. So you can do stuff there, and then we've noticed a lot of guys run the exhaust pipes and they want them loud, out of the box. They want to take all the baffles out. They want to run a zombie baffle, and that stuff, you're losing a lot of torque and power where you're using the bike the most, from idle to 3,500 RPMs to 3. You have some loss there. So even if you stuck with the same cam, didn't change anything, but got the right baffles and head pipe set up and tuned properly, shoot, you might like your bike better. And then we can do a cam with it too. So typically if you had that set up and you came in with exhaust that we don't get the peak numbers we're looking for out of it, we're going to recommend that exhaust system with that cam, install on your bike. You're like, wow, big difference. Some of these guys already have good stuff in their bike. They can just put the right exhaust setup on it, retune it, and get what they're really looking for.
I get a lot of questions about the 131. People asking, are they coming with the new oil pump?
You only get one more. Make it good.
It's and it's an odd question for us because we don't do a lot of Harley 131s. People asking about the crate motors. What's a good exhaust for them? What's this and that.
Well, if they buy a crate motor, it's going to have the most updated oil pump in it. If they have a dealership install a 131 on their bike, and their bike is like a 2018, and they don't offer them the 2020 oil pump, they're in the wrong place.
Well, also, if you're going to buy a 131 crate motor, you can have your local shop pull out your motor, send it to us. We can build a 128, a 130, 131, 133, shoot our 135 kit that's coming out in January. We have options to do that and send the motor back. We do that service. It's not something we broadcast out there a lot, but if you're going to do a crate motor and you're about to spend that kind of money, you can pull out your motor, send it to us. We can build it, send it back, custom package, something we do all the time, whatever you want. It's up to you how far you want us to go with it, but we have those capabilities. It comes back with a crate, the whole 9 yards, and we do have crate motors we're releasing this coming year as well. So instead of buying a Harley 131 crate motor of MSO, you can get a Moonshine build with MSO as well.
And those Harley crate motors, most of the time you're doing that because you're buying a new bike, you're trying to be in warranty, or things like that. In which case, the head pipe should be a Harley head pipe, and it should be a Harley exhaust.
And
and if you're trying to play warranty friendly, then you need to stick with all Harley parts.
Then you need to do the formula that Harley put out.
But then why buy the crate motor? Why not buy the 131 kit? The 131 kit all day.
Yeah, same thing though. Same thing. Even if you're doing a 131 kit and you're trying to play warranty friendly, those kits are designed around their exhaust and their intakes and things like that. Yeah. So if you're gonna start changing those parts out of that kit, then like you said, maybe you're looking at doing a different kit than a Harley kit.
Yeah.
The Harley kits work really well when you use all Harley parts.
If it's an existing 131, you've already bought it, it's already in the bike. Again, man, everybody's setup is different. I can't say that there's one pipe that's going to work. Like understanding what the cam is, what you've done with the induction, all of those things would, how you ride, the RPM range that you're riding in, all that would affect what pipe we would select for your setup.
Yeah,
So call us
Yeah.
in that case. And again, I'm happy to take those calls, even if, you know, chances are we're probably going to go in it and want to change the cam and, you know, rebuild kind of around that setup. But
And when we build it, we have options. You want powder coated lower rocker boxes, push rod tubes a little different, stuff like that. We can fine tune that because we're a custom shop. If you want some high dollar rings in your motor, like some gas ported rings so they hold more tension on the cylinder wall for better seal, we can upgrade your rings. If you want to spend, you know, extra little bit of money on the ring pack, we have our kits where we can get those for you. And we offer those for the 128, 124 setup, right from SNS or 131s we can get them for. There's just little things that we do are different because we're looking for the best part for everyone. Is that it? Unless there's a good one about like Aaron's hair, why Mike's so grumpy all the time.
We're gonna have to deal with it.
that's a good answer.
Well, you know, the answer, I think, to
needs
so
help,
many
too.
questions is call us.
Call us.
Yeah,
You
for a
know.
lot of it,
Well,
man. Because like he said, the
no,
setups
I'm
are
gonna
very
back up on
specific.
that one. If you're just calling for recommendations for your shop,
Don't call me.
wait for one of these, please, because we're going to be a little short with you because we have a list of customers that me and Aaron didn't get back to today that have already given us deposits or something. So that's why we'd like to start doing these for you guys. So if you have good questions, detail them out, model, bike, what you're doing, why you're asking. The more info you give us, the more we're going to try to give back an answer for you. And
That's
that's
a really
why
good
this has
point.
gone 2+ hours. It's not we don't want to answer. It's just we get busy. There's only so much time in the day. And we have guys waiting on their builds. And
Yeah.
we want to get to them first just because, you know, they've stepped up, brought us their bike, and we got to give them that
And
service.
leading into the next one, I think that's a really good point. Like there are very few blanket solutions in what we do. We do custom craft just about every job that we do to suit your style, what the parts are going, you know, what your end goal is. We're gonna, like a fine tailored suit, it's gonna be custom crafted to what you want. So that's why we are struggling a little bit with answering some of the broader questions. So apologies for that, but yeah. Next one, let's narrow it down a little bit, and these specific items, absolutely, we'll address them.
Well, you know, going into that specific stuff of tailoring it, we have 1mm overheads. We have heads with 1.5mm valves. We now have a 2/mm valve, a 2.5mm over valve, and the different size motors. And we're pairing each of those setups to the motors needed. It's not like you call us, we have one ported head we do, and that's our setup. We have different ported heads for different applications all the way down the line.
Change all of our combustion chambers.
Yeah, and
everything
if with
to fit.
that, yeah, the
Me and
combustion
Mike-
chambers change per cam,
Me and
per
Mike,
pipe.
we're working on today. We got new pistons for a setup we're working on, new combustion chamber, new head. We have some guys in the industry that are really, really good, been doing it longer than me and Mike, that have given us some help too. And they just have parts that they've done, and they can give us experience of what they've done and some really good racing pedigrees in the background. And, you know, we'd love to hear stuff from them to give us input because there's smart guys in this industry all over.
Yeah.
We're not the only guys
Yeah.
doing this. We do stuff differently, and every shop does stuff differently, but there are some smart dudes out there that know their stuff very well. that we
But
deal
we're
with.
not subscribing to just one theory. We're pulling the best of what a lot of people have to offer, which is super cool.
We like playing with everything.
I think that's a really good point, Aaron. That's a good place to close it.
I'm glad you guys are on those Bridgestones. Thank God.
Will you ride them on your favorite bike?
I do. I didn't say I didn't ride. Just try to dog me.
We're in
Suck your
those
paycheck.
fucking Metzlers, man.
Gave it to them for free. That's why they're riding them. Okay.
They're like, please
We
run
got
our
a free
tires.
set. If you guys got free sets, you'd be like, I'm riding them. They are awesome.
use the
though.
best of
They are
everything.
awesome.
I
We
want
love
tires
them.
I got
Run our
for
tires, well, fuck you. We'll give it to you for free.
Oh, hell.
He's like, okay, free, yeah.
They are good. But they're, I can't even get one of these put on my bike. Mike just. Did you get mine for the twin cam?
Yeah, they're
Don't be
they're-
strangers
they're
either. Come
upstairs.
here and visit the shop. Come see us someday.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. We love
Yes.
having
Yeah.
visitors.
Well, what is cool if you do come here, we have all these cool parts and pieces all over. You know,
Yeah, it is like a candy store. People walk
Yeah.
into the shop and it's like pretty normal for us, but we've got at least 1, 2, 3 bikes sitting here on carbon fiber wheels. At least 2 or 3 sitting around on aluminum swing arms.
remember all
5
the
or
ones that
6
are-
with
Dozen or more motor
with-
builds
with
going on
engines in or
simultaneously.
out.
Yeah, it's
different various
Yeah.
stages of building the engines.
Bowling,
Well, how many
Well,
124, 128 kits sit behind your desk?
at one point, I think there was like 20
Yeah.
that were sitting there. I think the pile's down to about 10 or 12 now.
So we have
Yeah, but-
And they
15.
keep cycling.
We
We
have
had
in,
another
but we're running
25
through 'em.
on their
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
Yeah, they're always back there.
There was a
huge
little
stack.
while I was
I
afraid I
ordered
wasn't going to
20
be able to see daylight.
135 kits today. The 135's coming, guys. You want a ripper for the street that beats all these other guys, that is street worthy. We're not pushing it above 135 for the street, but come January, we'll release more of that. But
If
we
you're
have-
trying to buy a trash basket, it's not gonna happen.
We have
like the
all
ass-
of them.
we buy them all.
Yeah, the ass eater is coming. It's
Yeah,
not
the
going to be
ass
the name.
eater, yeah.
Might be the Kraken. I don't know. We're trying to figure it out. If you guys have good names for the 135,
The jackalope.
I like the
The
jackalope. Because it only comes out
It's
after you drink a bunch of this
mythical
moonshine we
creature
have.
that you've never ever really seen, but everybody talks
Oh,
about.
you don't want to run into the jackalope 135, okay? Done. Murdered.
You want to race the jackalope for $1,000?
I think it's the jackalope. If you like the
Sure.
jackalope, please let us know. If you don't, it's Aaron's fault.
Cut.
Cut. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
Merry Christmas.